Welcome to our council meeting 30th of June. I'm going to ask Councillor Akwata-Brown to open with karakia for us, and then I'm going to shuffle around a few things. Morning, David. Morning, Kieran. We're just going to open with karakia, and then we'll be with you.
Good morning, no problem.
Mi noi tātou, e te hui, whaia te mātauranga kia marama, kia whai taki ngā mahi katoa, tū maia, tū kaha, aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou ia tātou katoa, hui e, tai ki e. For this hui, we seek knowledge for understanding, have purpose in all that we do, stand tall, be strong, let us show respect for each other. Amen.
Amen. Thank you for that. So, councillors, I am going to take the liberty to shuffle our agenda around a little bit. Good morning and welcome to our visitors here today. Lovely to see you. So we are going to start off with our audit report. Morning, David. Morning, Kieran. Thank you for sending through the 6-page letter. We received that yesterday. And we also have the report that we were going to discuss last week at our audit and risk, but unfortunately we had some technical issues. So thank you for agreeing to meet with us this morning. So I'm going to leave it in your capable hands to just walk us through it, and then there might be some questions from councillors. Thank you.
No problem at all. Firstly, wanted to start with a thank you to the management team for their support throughout the process. So it's obviously a lot of time and effort that goes into preparing a 10-year plan, and it's additional time and effort over and above that to support our audit process. So the support from the management team is much appreciated. For context, the majority of our audit work is completed prior to the consultation document going out to the community, and we completed that work and reported on that work to council in March of this year, and that covered all of our core work around looking at council's information on its assets and how finances are managed at an aggregate level. Our most recent work that we've completed primarily focused on considering changes since consultation, and also looking at how the document has come together and how it's presented as a whole in terms of the overall long-term plan. From our perspective, while there have been changes since consultation, generally at a very high level, the rates and debt profile is still reasonably consistent with the modelling that was completed pre-consultation. The opinion that we'll issue on the long-term plan includes an emphasis of matter paragraph, and that emphasis of matter paragraph relates to the uncertainty to do with Three Waters reform. That emphasis of matter is consistent with the emphasis of matter we included in our opinion on the consultation document, so that should be familiar to councillors, and it's also consistent with the emphasis of matter paragraphs that have been included in opinions for other councils around New Zealand, as it's obviously not a matter that's unique to Gisborne. Lastly, maybe wanted to mention that one of the notable additional pieces of information that has become available since consultation is that Waka Kotahi have confirmed indicative funding for councils around New Zealand for the first 3 years of the long-term plan period. For Gisborne, that funding was slightly lower than what's been assumed in the LTP, and the long-term plan hasn't been adjusted for that likely change in funding. So from an audit perspective, that is in our letter as an audit difference that hasn't been adjusted for. Our conclusion on that matter, though, is that that item is immaterial to the long-term plan as a whole. I might stop there, but very happy to either take questions on our letter or on other matters relating to the long-term plan.
Thank you for that. Councillors, any questions? Councillor Seymour. Stand up.
Thanks very much, gentlemen. I really appreciate that we are talking to you today rather than last week. But if I'm looking at the audit differences and I'm aware of the change in the subsidy from Whakatautahi, but I would be a bit concerned because you're effectively saying that the change of $1 million over 3 years, 984 to be precise, is not material. At what point would you consider a change of almost $1 million in an LTP to not be material or to be material?
Thank you, Councillor Seymour.
I think there's different ways to look at it, and in a practical sense, maybe it does present some matters that from an operational perspective, the team will need to work through in terms of how that difference is dealt with. From a materiality perspective, would have two comments. One is that the way we consider materiality for a long-term plan is consistent with the way that we consider materiality for an annual report. And generally the benchmark that we use at an aggregate level is 2% of expenditure for that year. So that's the yardstick that we use. And I don't think I think an important distinction is I don't think we're saying this is not of note from an operational perspective. I think we're saying from a financial reporting perspective, it's not material to what's being presented overall.
Supplementary. Thank you very much for that explanation. But I just think for our listeners and for our ratepayers, $1 million or virtually $1 million certainly is material. So it's good to have you give that explanation that from your audit perspective, it's 2% that you consider to be material, greater than 2%, because I think $1 million is a lot of money in most people's perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Seymour. Any other questions? The letter is quite clear, 6 pages of summary. Any other questions from the report that we had in our audit and risk committee? Because we will adopt this later in one of our reports. We will formally adopt this. So if there are no other questions of our auditors, I want to thank you for the work you've done for us. Thank you for that. There's a lot of uncertainty, interesting timing that the announcement of Three Waters is done one day before councils adopt their 10-year plan. So government is looking at keeping us on our toes, but thank you for that. And like you've noticed, we have made a lot of note of the Three Waters reform program in our audit, in our 10-year plan. So we are aware of the changes that might come and we will accommodate them as they happen. But thank you for your time this morning. We appreciate that you put this time aside to share with us and answer our questions. Thank you.
No problem at all. Thank you very much.
Okay, councillors. So now we are going to, before we do anything, I'm just going through this pile on my desk. We have 2 late reports. Can someone please move by Councillor Seymour, seconded by Councillor Burdett, that these reports be included? Thank you. Councillors, before I do anything else, I would like to introduce Michelle Frey, the Director of Livable Communities, who has taken over from Andrew. Michelle, no mai harawa, my welcome to our place. I know you do have lots of friends and whānau here as well, or unofficial whānau here as well. So thank you for joining us. We look forward to working with you. And councillors, please introduce yourselves, and then we just extend a warm welcome, and we know we will have a good working relationship with you. And thank you for the knowledge and the experience you bring to this role. Okay, let's get our agendas out. I've got 4 agendas, so I will go through them. But before we start, I'm just going to take my coat off. So any apologies? I have an apology for lateness from Councillor Robinson, and moved by Councillor Akuata Brown, seconded by Councillor Sheldrake. All in favour? Contrary, carried. Any declarations of interest? If not, I'm going to take you to 57 pages worth of minutes. It's not often we see that. Thank you, Coral, for all these sets of minutes. So what I'm going to ask is for us to go through this, the 50. So I'm sure if you have any questions, you will raise that. I'm more than happy to take these minutes separately. Preferably, I think if there are no major issues, we can move them as a pack. So Councillor Seymour, you're happy to move them as a pack. So I have minutes for the 18th of March, 22nd of April, 12th of May times 2, 19th of May, 27th of May. Moved by Councillor Seymour, seconded by Councillor Bidette. Any questions or queries? Now is your time. And just make sure when you do stand up and speak up, that Coral can hear you. Councillor Seymour, thank you.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just on the first set of minutes, and that's on page 12, was at 12.2, and I don't need it today.
But you say page 12?
Page 12 of the total agenda, and item 12.2.
Yep.
There was to be an update on the Wilding Pine situation on Titirangi. I don't need it today, but if we can just, you're going to put it in your...
Through your worship, it's on the action sheet. There's a
Yes.
note there.
We don't have it for today, they'll do it. Thank you, that's one. And then with respect, and it's only, I'm not sure whether it's absolutely essential, but it was respect to the hearings committee of the regional transport agenda and the way it is written.
What page are you on?
That is page 19, and it talks about just minutes of a hearing committee. And it does say in the very top in small print, Regional Land Transport Committee, but since the Regional Land Transport Committee is a significant committee with people out of organisation, I wondered whether as the minutes are recorded, it says minutes of the hearings committee, which tends to make it look like it's the minutes of the hearings committee of Gisborne District Council. And I wonder, it's not those two, Madam Chair, it's page...
No, I know. I'm just looking at my...
Yeah, and it's just page 19. I just wonder, it's just a process thing, but because it's a Regional Land Transport Committee, I think it should perhaps say that in the header.
Okay, who does the minutes for regional transport?
It's about process, and I'm sure someone will pick that up. I just have a question around on page 36, which is in the minutes of our meeting of the 19th of May, around the Waianae transformation project, around the reduction, and we talk about the reduction in pests, but the last one, the bullet point under response to questions, the contribution of working towards outcomes outside of external funding and are required to secure 5 million of external grants. I want to know if we've been able to secure any of those external grants yet.
What page was that on, Pat?
That is page 36 of the minutes of the 19th.
Who is going to answer that question? The external funding?
Have we been able to secure?
That's been confirmed, that external funding. So the applications, if you may recall, when we raised it, was on the basis that we had set amount for our in-council cash contribution to that. So if we were to change that, then we would lose.
No, I'm not asking to change it all. I'm just asking, do we have the external funding yet?
So yes, we have secured some funding.
Thank you.
Yes.
And I think I might have one more. No, that's all, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Seymour. Councillors, any other questions? Councillor Worsnop.
So my first one was just with regards to the total mobility scheme. Had we managed to,
Just tell us what page
that was page 21. Had we been able to factor the request of that deputation into our budget for the coming year? I know it wasn't supposed to be a lot of money, and it seemed like there was broad consensus that it made sense to increase the amount that was available to those people with mobility issues using the taxi service. So that was my first question. My second point rather was page 20. Oh, did you want to answer that first, or?
Diane. Oh, there she is. Diane.
Through your worship, it's
David, thank you.
So through your worship, the mobility package was being looked at as part of the whole review of the transport. So there's a total mobility review, and that was to be undertaken as part of that around the cost implications and the sharing of it. We agreed to put it over into that part, not to take it over from the 1st of July this year.
But it's in train. Thank you. My second point was page 26 of the hearings, LTP hearings. I just wanted to clarify that Nicola Wright's submission was potentially misinterpreted. She specifically asked that there not be a need to reapply, and we've put it down as that she's asked that you would have to apply. So just, I think it's important that we get the import of the submissions correct. So if that could be amended, please. And just pages 37 and 50 repeat the approval to spend more, do more presented, resulting in 1.2 million and 0.2% for biodiversity. So I'm not sure that it's under strategy and science and it's in there in two different places. I'm not sure if that's supposed to be the case or if we've repeated it deliberately. I know that there was a lot of backwards and forwards as we went through the enormous document, but I presume it's only supposed to be moved and seconded once. So that was all, thanks.
Okay. Councillors, any more questions on these minutes? Councillor Burdett. Just
Minutes of Wednesday, the 19th of May, the dollars is Ruatoya. This is a perennial, I've been at for years.
what page are you on, Bill?
Page 36,
36.
towards the bottom.
Yep.
I understand that we had made application for the cost of transportation and installation from MPI and got turned down, and we had gone back with our iwi partners with another application. Can anyone tell me where we are on that at present?
Yes, through your worship, we're still waiting on confirmation or otherwise of that, the outcome of that application. So MFE, it was an application that was put both to MPI and MFE. And MFE had paused on the freshwater improvement fund for the time and we're going to come back to us. So we're just waiting.
Thank you.
If we have no more questions, I have a mover and Councillor Seymour, seconder Councillor Burdett, all in favour. Contrary, carried. Thank you for that. We move on to our action sheet, which is on page 57. 57 of 727. Any questions in regards? There are quite a few that will be dropped off because they're completed. Thank you, Dion. Thank you, Jill, for the updates. Quite straightforward, nothing standing out. Any questions in regards to our action sheet? If not, we just turn over to our governance work plan on page 58. Okay, no more questions. We have no leave of absence. I have no acknowledgements and tributes. We have no public input and petitions. We have no extraordinary business. I have no notices of motion. I have no adjourned business. I take you to page 59, which are the community recommendations. We have a full page of that. Thank you.
Can we just go back to the agenda?
Yes, page 58. Just share, when you stand up to speak, just let us all know what page you
Page
are on.
58, but I just want to draw to your attention, the draft freedom camping bylaw is actually on today's agenda and there's not much else on the agenda for August. So I imagine, and I had written myself already note what else is going to be on that agenda because we seem to have huge agendas sometimes and very light agendas in others. So I imagine it'll have some material, but that is not accurate. We've got the draft one today. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I'm sure staff will play around and make sure.
Yes, so just through the worship, in terms of the council agendas, with deliberately light so that the council's scope was dealing with those matters that only council can deal with. For example, adoption of bylaws, LTPs. So the most bulk of the work is in the committees.
Okay, I take you to our committee recommendations. So as you can see from here, we have audit and risk that we had on the 17th. There's a draft trade waste bylaw. There is a regional transport recommendation. There's another hearings, which is one of these extra pages we have here. Let me just sort myself out. This is the draft freedom camping bylaw, were one of our supplementary papers for this morning. Okay, Councillor Bedette has moved everything. So we have 4 recommendations. So adopt the draft fraud, bribery and corruption policy, approves the Gisborne Trade Waste Bylaw 2021, adopts the Te Tairāwhiti Regional Land Transport Plan, and adopts the final Te Tairāwhiti Regional Public Transport Plan. And all of these are subject to minor amendments. So if you do have anything that you would like to add, now is your time. And then the last, number 4, approves our holding company, Gisborne Holdings Limited, statement of intent. I have a mover in Councillor Bedette, seconded by Councillor Faulkner. Floor is open. Councillor Seymour.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I particularly want to speak to the hearings panel draft freedom camping bylaw. I'd like to acknowledge Councillors Foster and Wharehinga, who were along with myself. The
This is the
panel.
supplementary paper we received.
Yes, but it's noted at the top of it is a supplementary paper, and on page 60, it's noted at the top the receipt of that. So it's contained within the recommendations of Councillor Burdett. But I just want to draw to people's attention, because it is something that is particularly interesting, some of the reasons for the decision. And if you go to the back page of the paper that's been tabled this morning, but I think for the benefit of the public, for submitters and for the Gisborne Gisborne Herald, the panel really considered the material that was provided to us. And we note that 60% of all the consultation responses were in support of prohibiting freedom camping at Tirihau Point North. I won't read all of this out to you because I urge you to read it for yourselves, but I just draw this to your attention. So 60% of all consultation responses were in favour of prohibiting camping at Tirihau North due to safety concerns, the rapid erosion of the North Point and the closeness of State Highway 35. It's quite interesting that since that hearing, we had that erosion on State Highway 35 at Tirihau Point, just slightly around the corner, but all part of that same eroded area. So 4 submitters spoke in favour of continuing that area of camping on a historical basis, and there still will be a small area where they can camp. The second point, that the bylaw is not inconsistent with the Bill of Rights, because there was some suggestion that to can have a bylaw around it was not consistent with the Bill of Rights. We have good advice that it is consistent with the Bill of Rights, and the proposed changes are considered to be reasonable and not overly restrictive. The charging regime, some submitters supported continuing a charging regime because they didn't want to see the cost be spread across all of the ratepayers, but we accept that Freedom Camping Act 2011 prioritises and allows, beg your pardon, prohibits council from charging a fee, but it does enable a monitoring regime. The panel agreed with those submitters who expressed concern at the structures that appear on beachfronts, and a number of people will have seen a variety of structures, without naming them individually, that appear as wind protection and as storage facilities. And so the committee did make a change in the script that a portaloo can be, while it is not a tent, is an acceptable item to be on those campsites. And further, the issue of homelessness, and that's been printed in the paper since. The Freedom Camping Bylaw is not a mechanism for managing homelessness, and the council officers made it clear that their bylaw inspectors will treat homelessness with sensitivity, but it is not and should not be considered a mechanism. The Freedom Camping Bylaw is not a mechanism for managing that. So I just want to draw those items to the attention of those who may be interested in freedom camping, and thank councillors Wharehinga and Foster for their participation.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Councillor Seymour, Foster and Wharehinga. I know you've had quite a couple of hearings in the last while. That's taken up some time. Thank you for doing that work on our behalf. Councillor Akwata Brown. Councillor Seymour, just your microphone. And then
Thank you, Councillor Seymour, for the work again of the hearings, those others that are in that space. You mentioned the sensitivity in respect to homelessness, and that has featured fair amounts of times within our local Herald and social media particularly. And so when we hear that the staff, of course, are sensitive to finding whānau living on the beach, I have a few people who call and ask if I can support them into housing, with all due respect to the crisis that we're in. I just wonder, our staff in the sensitivity space of acknowledging a whānau living on the beach with children for some time, what's the mechanisms that they have in their sensitive approach? Do we have levers that we pull to get those whānau that are living in tents and makeshift shelters due to homelessness? What's our role in respect to being sensitive to it, but in the support to enable those whānau to get into a home, a safe, dry environment? Because I'm sure our staff are struggling in this space to find that accommodation to meet the needs of the whānau that are living rough. So what have we got? What's the process, I guess? Because we do want to represent the views of all in our region as electeds, and homelessness is creeping up and more, coming to us in a whole heap of ways. I am involved with a group trying to work out how to meet some of the needs of whānau, but just with that sensitivity, I was just interested to know what's the levers council or staff have in this issue right now. Madam C.
Through your worship, so you have a bylaw, and officers need to implement that bylaw. However, the lever that you refer to will be discretion, and council officers have been clear that if there is a case of homelessness, they're not going to use the hard arm of the law, and so more often than not, they are referring them to the relevant agencies to get the support that they need.
Thank you for that. Councillor Dowsing, and then Councillor Wharehinga.
Thank you. Just a point for clarity. Can I ask why the draft fraud, corruption and bribery policy is an interim policy? And also, why are we approving a draft for bribery and corruption policy? Should it not just be approved the fraud, bribery and corruption policy?
Well, we're approving the draft to become the
But you wouldn't
fraud.
Did you just approve the policy? You don't, unless you're having draft in the title of the policy, we just approve the policy, I assume. But yeah, we're just wondering why it's interim.
Through your worship, we had an interim policy because there were some changes that needed to be made from the audit of risk between the second iteration of that. So they agreed at that committee to put in place interim while we worked on tidying up some of the policy detail, and then it came back to be adopted. It should have policy, not.
Councillor Wharehinga.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I just actually want to stand to acknowledge also my fellow hearings commissioners, Councillor Foster and our chair, Councillor Seymour, in regards to the trade waste bylaw hearings that's been approved here today. We heard a lot from our community, and by and large, everybody wants to make sure that we're looking after our awa and our moana. I want to particularly note the removal of mortuary waste from our wastewater system that is also included in here. It's country leading. It's leading in regards to every other region, and I think we're taking a firm stance, and a lot of other councils are looking at us in regards to this kaupapa. Not only does it meet environmental a higher level of environmental standards that we really stand for here in Te Tairāwhiti, it meets a lot of our iwi partner aspirations. We heard from Noho Whakaati, we trust. We've heard from the Kiwi group. We heard through this hearings process from our experts in our community in regards to looking after our environment, our title. So I really want to acknowledge my fellow hearings commissioners in regards to that. We did a great job, and I fully support these recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Wharehinga. Councillor Worsnop. What do you want to raise? Just stand up Speak up. and then
Sorry,
we know.
just on page 68,
Yep.
where it says the matters considered reasonable for the decision. Mortuary means that whole paragraph is repeated twice. The second half of it needs to be taken.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you. Just a double. Okay, councillors, I have a mover in councillor Bedit, a seconder and councillor Faulkner. Recommendations on page 60. All in favour? Contrary? Carried. Thank you. Okay, let's just focus on our work. We move now to a massive piece of work which we have been working on for 18 months. Councillors, these two big documents which we will adopt also. Number one is our auditor that we, you might have to lean on my chair. What happened to that chair? So I just want to make it clear that the paper that we have just had with our auditors, just clarify it for me, was that part of our audit and risk committee, but we now adopted in this agenda? Yep. And then any minor changes that you have. Tim, I picked up 2 typos, which I'll say yes, page 113 and page 153. I'll send it on to you. If you have any minor stuff, just flick it through to Tim today, because they just need to tidy it up. Even if 200 people read this, sometimes I write a letter and then Donna reads it, I read it again, and then when we send it, we see a typo. So if you pick up some small stuff that you want changing, please just email it to me or Tim, but by the end of today. Okay, so any questions or queries in regards to the big documents that we plan to? So I'm very happy to move 1, 2, and 3 on page 80. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Wharehinga. Any questions or queries of Tim? Councillor Seymour.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and I do want to acknowledge the huge amount of work council officers put into getting this document to the state that it is. It certainly was 18 months' work, but there are still things in it that sometimes one wonders if one saw them at the time. So I just want to ask one or two operationalised questions, because I'm not sure when we debated them. So the design, this is page 82.
Thank you.
To design and buy the land for our wastewater wetlands project in 2030. And so this is the LTP for the year to 2031. And while there will be different people sitting around the table in 2030, I just wanted to know what's the background to that, because I don't know that we've got much on the table. So what are we saying about buy the land for our wastewater wetland in 2030?
Mr. Wilson, is that a question to you?
Through your worship, that's for the 3rd phase of the wastewater treatment plant. So we've undertaken a large amount of work around the requirements for wetland size, scale, and those things. In your long-term plan, you have a fund every year looking at alternative use and disposal options. That's for timing for the purchasing of that once we know that we have a viable option for taking forward.
Yeah, I get all that. Thank you very much, Mr. Wilson. I just wondered whether it might have said subject to site selection or something like that, because this is frightfully definitive, and I don't know that we've actually found the site just yet, and others might ask the same question. A couple of other questions. I was a bit, because my pet hobby horse, I know, and others will know that too, the Waianae Transformation Project, and this is on page 88, and it's about the milestones we're talking about doing. So, for example, we assumed that 240 hectares would be replanted in year 1. And we then go on to say they've been revised, and we're going to do 25 hectares in year 1 and 237 hectares in year, I can't read what that here, and 230 in year, and it doesn't say which year. But seriously, as a landowner, I actually know what 237 hectares is, and I don't know how anyone can assume if that is in 1 year. If you're going to then tell me it should say in years 3 to 5 or something, I could accept it. But if we only manage to do 25 hectares in year 1, or we're going to do 25 hectares in year 1, when we're in the draft, we assumed we're going to do 240, let's get that 237 clarified, please? Because I don't think anyone's going to plant 237 hectares manually in 1 year. Can I have an answer to that, please?
Your worship, I'll have to ask Deanne if she can respond to that. It's a project planning issue.
But it should have a year beside it too, shouldn't it? At the end, I think we've finished. Says 25 hectares in year 1 and 237 hectares in year nothing. If we're looking at the bottom of page 88, this word missing.
Year 2.
And I think it would be good to add the scope of how many years that might take. Then, without stealing Councillor Warnock's thunder, I'm happy for you to pursue it, but on page 162 are some of those milestones which don't seem to be particularly large. I'll leave it for and I'll support Councillor Warnock in asking those questions. On the bottom of page 66, and I appreciate this is script that arrives in here after we might have seen the absolute detail. And unfortunately, of all days, I left my glasses behind.
Page what, Kate?
166. The removal of council coastal infrastructure stroke assets once they become a health and safety risk. Oh, cheers, I think I can just see it, but it'll be better for all of you. Thanks. Removal of council coastal infrastructure stroke assets once they become a health and safety risk and making areas safe to protect the community and coastal users. I've got a suspicious mind, as you know, and that is at the very bottom of the first column. What is that actually saying, and what are we planning to remove? Is there a risk?
Who's in charge of that? Through your worship, it's aligned to our infrastructure strategy and the direction that you've set around climate change and managing any future mitigating actions as a result of climate change and coastal erosion. So we've fleshed this out. We've had many webinars coming at us. We're going to have the Natural Built Environment Act that also includes climate change and adaptation for council. So that's what that's referring to.
It's not the Tokomara Bay Wharf, is it?
This is in land, rivers and coastal. Wharfs are under roads.
It all talks about a coastal infrastructure and an asset. So as long as it's not.
Wharfs are roads.
Great. Yes, I know they are, but I
However,
just to see that it could be interpreted again in a few years' time by others who might be around the table as something completely different. Now, the question I asked earlier, 172, the total waste perceived as illegal dumping, and everybody would support a bigger effort on that. But it's in the middle green box, and the second box, total waste received as illegal dumping. We're going to decrease it year on year, but what are we going to talk about the effort we're going to make that requires us to achieve that? Because it's easy to write, we'll decrease it year on year, and it might be in our waste plan, but I just think we should talk about it so the public at large know and understand what actions we're going to take. There's another pile at Makarori Beach. It's been there for 2 or 3 days. People just seem to think that driving into the dunes in this town is a place where you can just get rid of your rubbish, and it's not. But what we're going to do about it remains for us to manage. So I'm just coming up to my
last question.
Hopefully last one. Yes.
Thank you.
And I have to say again, I find it particularly disappointing and a sad day for this council that we are sheeting home the cost of services for which people receive no service whatsoever onto unreticulated areas. And I look at the graph on page 268, where 6,500 people get a reduction in their rates of $0 to $250, and unreticulated areas in this district, right, even as close as Makaraka, you'll find when you read that spreadsheet, they are having a considerable rate rise while still fully funding their septic tanks and fully funding their fresh water. And if we look at the community that suffered in the events of the last week, we are dumping increased costs on those communities for a service they will never receive. And if I thought that this was the only rise there was going to be, it might be tolerable, but it concerns me that as soon as we put 10% into these this rating scenario, then as soon as we have a new and larger cost, the cost to these individual households is going to go up. So I maintain my position of resistance to the charging for services completely unreceived, and it's nothing like libraries. or pools, which we can use by choice. It is only about the services the public is required to provide for themselves at 100% of their own cost. So
Thank you,
I just
Councillor
draw
Seymour.
people's attention to that, and I find it impossible to support that. Thanks, Madam
Thank you for
Chair.
that. Any more questions in regards to these two big documents? I'm just going to ask Councillor Worsnop, you raised it earlier that you wanted to talk. If you can just take us all to the page that we wanted to talk. So it's about targets that we set.
Excuse me. Yep, so
What page?
there's probably a few pages because of it
Yep.
is found in certain different
Give us the first
categories,
one.
but 162 enforcement and compliance. We have goals that are lower than the status quo. So I find, you know, as an organisation,
Yep.
we're responsible for getting better outcomes rather than maintaining or accepting lower outcomes. So I really would like to see us having far higher aspirations. Just picking dog control as an example, if we're managing 87%, that's great, but I don't want the team to think, oh, well, now we've done our job, we can let it slip a bit. You know, it really should
think that way.
It should be 90. You know, we should be saying, hey, look, we've done a really good job to get here, but now we want to get even better. And I think that same trend is evident if you go forward to page 69, where I think it is, what is it? Roads, we've got no goals for the unsealed network at all. And when we review our success for the last LTP, we measured that against what we put in this document here. So the fact that we haven't captured at all what performance we want from our unsealed network means that continues to be invisible. Meanwhile, we know, and we've actually said that we expect some deterioration in that over the LTP. How are we supposed to track that if that's not a performance measure? For stormwater, page 178, virtually all of the measures are lower than what we're currently achieving. So for me personally, I think that it's important that we are aspirational, and we're sending a message to our organisation that conveys our community's expectations. And we've actually said that we've got as one of our strategies that, you know, our service to our community is pivotal. We need to translate that into our expectations of ourselves. I welcome on page 96 the new measure, which
196.
196, sorry, which looks at the percentage of our city that agree with decisions that this table's made. I think that that's an important thing that we have an understanding of. And if I can just rattle through the rest of what I've got here. On page 196, water resilience, where is that in the strategy and science, or does it not belong in strategy and science? Does it live somewhere else? Because I know we're about to embark on a work stream that looks at our resilience as a region and how things like the MAR fit into that, or alternatives. But it doesn't, I can't see it on page 96. So if it's somewhere else, I haven't noted it as probably the specific project that it needs to be, with the kind of emphasis that it deserves. And just noting on page 237 that our emergency works budget is fairly static after year one of the LTP. And given that in our actual long-term plan itself, we reference multiple times the fact that we expect our emergency works expenses and the incidence of emergencies to increase. So there's a conflict there between what we're actually budgeting and what we expect to happen, which is potentially quite problematic. And I 100% lastly support what Councillor Seymour has said with regards to where these costs fall. When we had deliberations, there was a significant difference in terms of the increases that the rural community and those that were unconnected would expect to see, and the additional items that we've added to that long-term plan have all fallen on the same people, and they've exacerbated the difference. There's no surprises there. My understanding is that we all understood that in that meeting. I remain uncomfortable with it, but that's because I know who I'm supposed to represent and whose voices I'm supposed to bring. I do think that we're going to get to the end of year 3 and we're going to face an enormous amount of pressure due to the fact that our roads have been underfunded, and we've continued to fund some things that a large proportion of our community possibly see as nice to have. So I think we should be prepared for that. And that's all from me. Thank you.
Yeah, Tim, if you can just, we can share this, I'll just put this here, but just like that.
Thank
Just leave it. Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you for those questions, Councillor. I think I can talk briefly in general to some of the performance measure targets, and then I might pass over to Mr. Wilson for if there's any some specific ones on the ones you mentioned in water supply and stormwater. Look, in general, it's quite a process to go through to determine to set the targets for performance measures, and there's a whole bunch of sort of information out there in terms of what's sensible, what's smart and realistic. And in terms of we have always encouraged all activity managers across the organisation to look to stretch targets where possible and where realistic. But I think there are some times when it can be a bit difficult when you're comparing to just one previous year's results. For example, if you look at the stock control, you say it's 85% as the target, and last year 87% was achieved. Now I don't have the previous years to that directly in front of me, right? Yeah, so that's part of it, because you can't, when you're doing a long-term plan, it's not sort of always feasible to track in years worth of previous information. It's all available through our annual report, where we track and we show how well we're achieving against those goals. But it's quite possible that 87% was a bit of a jump on other years. I don't have that in front of me, but so I couldn't say that for sure. But it's not always sensible to be constantly changing based on how the previous year went. You set a target that is realistic and achievable and is a good stretch for you as an organisation. And some years you will achieve above that, and some years you won't. You might not. You don't want to be sort of putting negative sort of red marks against teams that are actually potentially improving their achievement against a target. And we do reassess them on a regular basis. So what I can say is that none of the measures have decreased. None of the targets have decreased from previous years. They have the majority are continuing to increase, but we don't always increase all of them because it's dependent on budget and dependent on what's a reasonable and realistic target for those teams. But if there's any specific ones, sorry.
Just supplementary to that, I guess the question is for ourselves: do we think we're smashing it? Are we knocking it out of the park? Because if we're not knocking it out of the park, and we're already exceeding our targets in some of these areas, then we haven't set our targets high enough.
Any more questions? Okay, Councillor Faulkner, Foster, Akwater Brown, new man whose surname I just forgot to use. My brains are limited today. Isaac.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question comes back to a high level, more a strategic plan level, and it's around, and I note your comments, Your Worship, about the fact the central government, in rather cynical fashion, has released snippets of what they consider to be the plan going forward for Three Waters the day before we are expected to land our long-term plan. From a strategic level as our organisation, how do we revisit this once we have the information available to us about the final decision or the final proposal and what it looks like? And what can our ratepayers expect from us in the way of a realistic time frame once we know what it is that we're dealing with?
Thank you for that. CEO, Madame CEO.
So through your worship, last night you would have seen in the media would have received also a pile of information that included the modelling, the data that, so some of what the councils had provided into that the boundaries, etc. And so that will come out this morning at 10:30 because. But my understanding is 2024 is when these entities will go live. And in a couple of weeks' time, the minister will need to make a decision around whether it's an opt-in or it's mandatory. And so we're still in that grey phase yet, because if it's mandatory, then we're going to have it spelled out as to what it's going to look like. If it's not, then we need to go through a process of engagement, etc. So we're still very much wait and see. And it's not 10:30, so we shouldn't really be talking about it.
So Councillor Faulkner, we will get to it in the CEO report today, and I've just had Donna print out the slides. I should really get a copy for everyone, just of the 6 slides that were just to give us the basic information. But hand on heart, the information, and Councillor Worsnock and myself communicated about basic information, really. So at this stage, our stance would be we need way more information. We need to know about the opt-in, opt-out before we can make any decision. So we'll have a thorough discussion a little bit later, and then we can have those plans open. Thank you for that. Councillor Foster.
Just referring to page 215, prospective statement of comprehensive review and expenses. Just going down to the grants, donations, subsidies and contributions for the capital. I just note on 2022, we've got 61 million odd, and in 23, 41 million odd. And then after that, it drops right down to 13 and 14 millions. Now, I understand the first lot would be the Olympic pool, but even after that, it still would be quite high. So could I just have an explanation what those 2 years of what the grants and donations and subsidies entail, please? And bear in mind that there'll probably be other ones later on down the years, which will increase those lower numbers anyway, hopefully.
Most of that relates to the PGF and the timing of it. As you said, there is the pool, which is the 40 odd million times over the 2 years, and depending on where it occurs. We've also got different funding, which is part of the free water reforms, which is 11 million that comes into that play. There is the Waipoa flood protection, which is 7.5. And there is also PGF on the roads, which is a significant amount that occurs within that first 2 years as well.
So on that, this is nothing part of the FAR rate isn't included in this part, is it? That's a separate.
So through your worship, it basically, as you can see from year 3 through to year 10 on that second row, it goes from 13.6 to 18.7. The majority of that would be the normal roading maintenance renewals network in there. So that's just that's your normal BAU kind of level that you would have.
Operational. Cool.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Foster. Councillor Brown.
I've just got a couple. Firstly, though, I want to congratulate the team for the work that's been accomplished in regards to this long-term plan. The engagements, having attended a number of them, were fantastic, and talking to our everyday people about what they hope to see for this region was fabulous and a great opportunity. And I love that majority of the people did see our rationale was the best option, although there were some others with some other options. So kia ora koutou, ngā mihi to you all. So just want to go back to Tim, the discussion in respect to some of the measures. Just one of my page 162. So in this document or diagram box, it talks about our levels of service and performance measures. Just one of them kind of jumps out a bit in respect to some explanation to 52% of registered and licensed premises that undergo an environmental health compliance inspection annually. I think Helen's who I'm directing this to. And then we've got 52% as the result. So I just wanted could you give me some explanation as to the 52% discussion and then the result? That's just a natural outcome of that. So I just want some explanation. Yeah, we raised that.
Through you, Madam Chair. the 52% in relation to registered licensed premises. It's talking about timeframes as well as the fact that they go through those audits. And so there's been a big change to the Food Act. It doesn't actually require us to do it every year. It requires us to do it every 3 years. But then those premises that don't do so well get on a different schedule. So it's us responding to and going through the appropriate schedules for the appropriate places. And as you probably well aware, a bit of a short staffing in that area too, and some IT issues. So we're working through those, and we're hoping to improve those measures as we go forward. As you can see, the goal is to get a greater percentage as we go through.
Thank you, Ms. Montgomery, for that explanation. I guess we are, as council, talking about some legislative policy change and directions that happen in this space. So I appreciate that. As Councillor Worsnop has already noted, we're always trying to knock it out of the park. We want to be in our best space. So we appreciate it comes with external factors too. So kia ora to that. So I just want to go to page 152 because this excites me because it's about my backyard. Navigate Tai Rāwhiti. I love that it's called that in respect to it. But I just want to ask Diana, I guess this is directed in respect to the mahi you've been up to, and thank you again for the beautiful works that are going on in beautiful parts of our region that are challenged. I wanting to know, are we confident in respect to the parking and I guess when I go down to the Maya, the site, you know, parking, getting tourist bus or whatever, etc. I just feel, are we confident that it covers off getting to and from in that space, being it's surrounded by a working port that's developing as well. Just that particular space, I often walk down there, and I know Councillor Foster lives there, but just traffic and the flows, etc., to promote that, because it's such beautiful sculpture. Are we confident it's safe and it's got more to come? So I'm just wondering about the space when I go down there with a truck and a car and a logging truck particularly. So that's one of my questions in respect to this beautiful work. Are we confident that that's safe and it's you know, it's a beautiful place? So that's my one question in that respect. I'm not sure who would like to answer.
Through you, Your Worship. So the Te Puhi Kaiti site development is complete, and the parking that's provided there through the bus lay-by area is also complete. Any other questions in regards to traffic flow and parking would be something that I'd be referring to Dave Wilson to respond to.
Okay.
Thank you for that. Apologies. Yeah, so this is to improve the safety down there. The bridge is still being worked on, so that's not been stopped, and the team is still doing some work with Ngāti Waianae on that pedestrian bridge to come across to ensure that will support safety outcomes.
Oh, thank you. And then I just, in line of some fabulous activity that happened in our awa, an orca and the baby came up the river, and I see on page 166 when we talk about improved fish passage. I mean, are we going to be a whale watch city? How are we going to improve the orca watch passage, or is this a one in a lifetime kaupapa? But I just thought, you know, we're talking about our awa, and lots of people were really, you know, kind of overwhelmed to see an orca with their baby in our awa. So I just wanted to just say, are we looking to how we manage that, just in regards to improved fish passage? I'm pretty sure it just was in there because it was a bit rough out at sea, but that was more just how amazing was that. And then last question, 196, because all about participatory democracy, and thank you to our democracy team who worked really hard with the scope we've got. I just wanted to ask if we could add in respect to our role, there's a lot of really good kōrero to what we've been up to and what we're going to get up to, but STV, I just wondered if we could, is that space we could discuss the voting mechanisms we have and add that construct in here. That was my question to that, but I just noticed it's got a lot of kōrero to our role in democracy, but I wondered if the voting it just doesn't mention STV. I guess I'm asking if that could be added as a construct to discuss, because we often do. So that's me, but thank you
for that,
again, team.
Councillor.
You're on. Kia ora.
Thank you for that. I had Councillor Hughes next, and then Councillor Dowsing. Thank you.
Mine's just a quick question on page 169 around the footpaths. That's the outcomes. I just wanted to know, is that just the 1 year that they weren't measured, or?
What page are you on?
169.
Not measured.
Your worship. Excuse me.
Mr. Wilson, thank you for
Through
answering.
your worship, it's a biannual survey that we do for the footpath, so it's every second year that we do it.
Awesome. Councillor Dowsing, thank you.
Thank you. Just a quick question on 196, just around democracy. It says support our elected members to become effective community leaders for the people of Te Rāwhiti by including professional development to reflect Te Ao Māori. I don't think we should limit our professional development to just Te Ao Māori. So it should reflect improvements across the board.
Wide.
The other piece there was, I noticed in years 4 to 10, improve council technology to allow for off-site council and committee meetings to be live streamed, especially on Marae. That's like a $200 piece of technology. I think we can bring that forward out of the 4 to 10.
So any small changes just to Tim, please? Councillor Burdett, just your microphone. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I stand to speak to fairness and equity. If you all refer to page 272.
272.
And look at the communities I represent. The rate rises are going to be impacted on them. 6%, 6.2, 6.4. And look at the level of rate rise. Then go over the page. And look there, 2.4%, 1.8%,
7.
0.6. The second page in the lot I'm referring to, enjoy all the services that are provided in the city. Tagamara Bay, we won't go over there. We know what's happened of late. Go north. They don't enjoy the same services, but they get hammered with the rate rises. I've been involved in 3 long-term plans. To me, this is the worst impact on the northern region that we could possibly do. And I asked the question, how did we get there? And why more than anything? I'm talking about reality and facts as they sit in front of us. So I'm going to find it very difficult to vote for this long-term plan. I've supported all the last ones, but when you impact on the people I represent without so much as a by leave or any excuse for it, I'm not part of that. Kia ora.
Thank you for that, Councillor Burdett. Councillor Gregory, I can't remember people's names today.
Thank you. I've just got a small question with regards to page 93, next steps. The letters that are sent out to the submitters with regards to their decision. Are those individual letters for explaining what happens, or is it just a stock standard?
Through your worship, it's a combination. The vast bulk of submitters submitted primarily on the key consultation issues that were presented, and so the vast bulk of those submissions they'll receive say a standard response that provides with council's overall decisions. But those say group submitters and submitters who sought either funding from council or some form of relationship or have specific requests of council will be receiving targeted specific information in relation to their submissions.
Well, I want to thank thanks to your staff. I know it's not been an easy journey for some. It's been tough for us as well. But at the end of the day, we've reached a space where today we can adopt the 10-year plan. So I just want you to, on behalf of councillors, convey that thanks to your staff. I want to thank councillors. Thank you for bringing robust discussions to our table. It's not been easy. It's not been an easy 18 months for us here, for us in Gisborne, for us in Tairāwhiti, for us in New Zealand, for us in the world. So it's been an unsettled time, but still we've chugged along and we've reached a point today where we can adopt this 10-year plan. So please convey thanks to your staff.
Madam Chair, can I ask that you vote on them separately, please, when you come to the vote?
Number 1, I moved it, Councillor Wharehinga. It is our audit. All in favour? Contrary, carried. 2, adopt our 10-year plan, subject to any minor changes.
Division,
which I'll
please.
email you.
Can we have a division, please?
All in favour? Against?
Aye.
3. Are you voting against the 10-year plan? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Thank you. Yes. Hughes, Burdett, Worsnop, Faulkner, Seymour. Agrees that it is financially prudent to budget to an accounting surplus. All in favour? Contrary, carried. Thank you for that. Okay, we are going to put these big aside. And move on. Yeah. So we are going to put these 2 big documents aside. Thank you, Nadine. Move on to our rate setting. So this is page 656. Okay, so it's a massive recommendation. Page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and this is just how stuff are divvied up. Page 664, 5, so 665. So I'm going to open up this for discussion. I'm happy to move this. Seconded by Councillor Robinson. Any questions? Councillor Cranston, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, just the anomaly that stands out there as a targeted rate for on page 659. Got a big number there. Is that a changing number or is that set for a long period of time, or is it targeted? So the Waianae for June protection. So when you look at the numbers down the right-hand column here, it's quite a standout.
Your Worship, yes it is. It's only for those properties that had hard engineering walls, and there's about 12 to 14, and so therefore it was over a 20-year period that they would be paying per annum for their contribution to it. It is virtually paid off, and so therefore the amount will reduce to the loan that is outstanding. So yes, that is a specific to a very few number of ratepayers.
End date on that, do we know?
It's this year that it comes into. It's either that year or the part in the next year, but yes.
Any more questions? Okay. So it's all those sheets of up till page 665, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Robinson. All in favour? Contrary, carried. Okay, we move on to page 672. This is just a paperwork to be completed as Mr. Tamati is not in that position anymore and Mr. Green is. Moved by Councillor Seymour, seconded by Councillor Akuaka Brown. Any discussion in regards to that? Please put your hands up as it's a person that we are voting for. Number 1 and 2 on page 672. Yep, it's everyone, Coral. Thank
Madam Chair, I think significant thanks should be given to Mr. Green for the work that he did in Tukumara Bay last week. I mean, it wasn't a true civil defence declared emergency, but he filled a huge role alongside other council officers in that community. So if that could be conveyed to him, please.
Councillor Burdett.
And I speak to support what Councillor Seymour said. I've had a lot to do with Ben in the last week or so, and he's still hard at it, the Northern region. If he's not on the phone, he's organising assistance to those ones that desperately need it. So we're just, in my view, so lucky to get a staff member that dedicates himself to his job.
And can you please add Ms. Ward, Lillian Ward, to that? She has been on the ground doing so much, keeping the community informed, also via Facebook, and making sure everyone knows what's going on, having a meeting every day. So it was lovely to see that presence there at the sports
I
club.
support that, Madam Chair, but I didn't mention the name because she wasn't in the paper that we're talking about, but it's absolutely true. Thank you.
Thank you. Have we passed this far? Moved by Councillor Seymour. Oh, they did. Thank you. Okay. Airshed for Gisborne City. There is going to be a presentation. Who is the airshed person? Thank you, Joe.
Morning, everybody. Hopefully this will be relatively straightforward compared to what you've just been through. Waiting for the presentation. If you'd like, I can start by discussing the paper anyway, because it is fairly self-explanatory in the report. Basically, under the RMA and the National Environment Standards for Air Quality, which sets our requirement to monitor our air quality, it sets standards for different parameters of air quality, and also tells us what we need to do if we exceed those standards. Under the regulations, you can define air quality management areas or airsheds. Because we haven't yet defined one for our region, by default, our whole region is considered one airshed. This has implications for how we manage that airshed, because over our winter months, we know that we are getting exceedances of those standards. And in this last year, we had 18 exceedances. The standards allow for 2 before it's called a breach, and your airshed is classified as a polluted airshed. So that means our whole region is currently defined as a polluted airshed, and this limits our ability to grant further discharges to air consents. At the moment, this is impacting 5 consent applications for our region that are occurring in areas far outside the city. So Te Araroa, out towards Dunstan Road, and what we are proposing with defining an airshed around just the city limits is to say that we will still manage the city. The city can be managed separately to the rest of the region. So it means that it allows us to accept those applications outside of the city, to process them under our current rules and regulations in the TRMP, and to grant them if appropriate. So it's not meaning that anyone outside the city can suddenly start polluting all they want. We do have those limits and regulations in place. It just means that we can actually accept them and consider them. Because at the moment, the restrictions mean that we have to, any application would have to show how they could offset their discharges, and offsetting can be quite technically challenging, because it basically means you have to show how you are removing discharges from another source by the same amount as what you're proposing. So hopefully that's clear. It probably would have been clear if I could have run through the
Any questions?
presentation, but yeah, happy to take questions.
Tony and then Kerry.
Thank you. So I'm just trying to get my head around, when I read the paper, around the state of the current consent holders' applications that are on hold. Are these renewals or are they new consent applications?
My understanding is that most of them are, so under the regulations, you can renew a consent that's if it's at the same level of discharge, but these are activities that are wanting to either expand their current activities or are new activities.
Okay, so the thing that stood out for me in this paper is, I know there's no legal requirement to consult with Māori, but given that Te Rūnanga o Ngāti Porou submitted on air quality, as noted in the paper, I would not support this paper going through this recommendation now. This should be put on ice until there's been some consultation with Māori around this, given that an iwi is specifically submitted on this issue. I think it would be really inappropriate for us to box ahead and declare an airshed over the city without having had a consultation. And given that there's only 5 consent holders waiting or pending, we don't know how long they've been waiting. Can I talk? Yeah, okay. So given that it just appears to be 5 and we're not exactly sure the status of the impact on those consent holders, I think it would we should take some time out and do some fuller consultation.
The reason that we deemed that consultation was not necessary at this stage was because it doesn't change how we manage the air quality, and it doesn't change the requirements for our communities, or our requirements to monitor, or our requirements or how we regulate. All it means is that we are defining where the problem is, so that we can manage, so that, well, we're just removing those restrictions for consents that will not impact the polluted area. So there would, as we go through the TRMP review and do look at, we will have to consider how we are going to improve air quality, and this may also include a requirement for more monitoring outside of the city at a later date, if we are considering places that might be breaching those. And I know that submission that Ngāti Porou did ask for us to consider monitoring in Tolaga Bay and Ruatoria. So these are things we can look at further on as we move through the TRMP process. There are also other things we can do outside of those, of the RMA planning, around education, supporting other community schemes like healthy home schemes to improve home heating, those sorts of things that will have an impact on our air quality.
Madam Chair, all of those matters you spoke about impact on Māori from healthy homes to understanding of taiao, and given that this proposal straddles multiple iwi rohe, I just think it's utterly inappropriate that we would consider this without consulting Māori. It just seems fly in the face of a position that we've taken on other major issues.
Thank you for that.
Commitment this council has made to consultation.
Councillor Dowsing next, and then Councillor Seymour, and then Warsnop. You just, it's your turn. I've written it down. Yes. I
Thank
see
you.
I see you.
I had a question that ran along a similar course, except it was more, if we understand the causes of the pollutants, then one would believe that that's the case in our rural townships as well, if it's wood burners. So if we're creating an airshed for the Gisborne urban region, why are we not creating one for the other rural townships? Because effectively they deserve monitoring and deserve the same protection as our urban area in the city. So yeah, one question is, why are we not rolling out more airsheds? And the other was just how long have those current consents been delayed for? How long have they been in the pipe for?
Ms. Montgomery.
Sorry, I missed that.
So as most of you will probably remember, there was a recommendation. Sorry, as most of you will probably remember, there was a discussion as part of the LTP documents and the spending in relation to monitoring some of those rural townships. And so we need the evidence to talk about what's going on in those particular areas before airsheds are created. So obviously there's, you know, a decision being made, but we can look at that at a later time if that's acceptable or what the councillors want.
Thank you. And yes, noted that we've got the date received for the applications here. Am I to understand then that these have been, for example, the Fulton Hogan application has been held since 30th of September 2020 based solely on this? And if so, did it take this long to come to our table for this? Why did it take so long to come to our table if a consent has been delayed for such a significant amount of time?
Yeah, so through you, Your Worship, there was some technical information that sits behind this report. So we actually had to engage an external consultant to review where a potential airshed could go and what it could look like. So that's been some of the delay in getting this report to you.
Okay, yeah, it seems like an extraordinary amount of time if we've known of an issue since the 30th of September to support that consent. I would be happy to move the paper, but I would also say that we need to continue forward with monitoring and airsheds for our rural townships so that we have parity across the region.
Thank you for that. Seymour, Warsnop, Foster, Aquata Brown. Fine.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to second that. And the manner of
use your microphone.
Thank you. I'm happy to second it. The matters of airsheds and townships should be a matter for consultation with the community at a community meeting, and that is exactly what could happen and be put on the agenda. But I just wanted to explore further the comment on those boxes. Is the impact on the airshed, is that from the activity of a piece of machinery that is quarrying? Because I struggle to see what other impact there can be from quarrying that would impact on the airshed. Is that the vehicle?
Through you. Well, through you, Mayor, it's when they're crushing the aggregate and moving, they create a lot of dust, which is particulate matter, which is what part of the air quality standards are very concerned about, is that's particulate.
Right, so it's dust and fumes from the machinery, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, more particularly.
And we should note that the second one of those boxes, that is metal that's used for metaling roads on the East Coast. So while we sit here and hold up, and it's taken this long, as been alluded to by other councillors already, it has limited the access to reasonably handy metal, and the Huanui quarry is quite a significant quarry for the East Coast, and we don't have a lot of metal. So I'm happy to second the paper, Madam Chair.
Through you, Mayor, I would just comment that those that are renewals are allowed to continue operating while we wait for that consent.
Councillor Worsnop.
Yes, so I guess my point was, I presume that creating this airshed does not preclude creating others. And it doesn't by default mean that all of the rest is one airshed either. Like, so defining this area doesn't simply split our region into two airsheds. It means that we only have the one that is delineated here. Is that correct? And I just want to highlight the fact that we're talking about pollution, but it's not, there's different kinds of pollution, and it's not emissions as such that this is trying to capture, which is why dust and wood burning are captured, but not things like the emissions from the vehicles that are crushing the rock. It's specifically large particles, ones that you can see, not ones that you can't see. And I support Pat in terms of, I do think there probably is an appetite to understand in the smaller communities what their profile is, but also understanding that they probably don't want to pay a lot for it. And you don't have anywhere near the critical mass of people. So even if you've got everybody in the town burning their fire, it still wouldn't add up to even one small suburb in our city. So I think some of the comments that we had coming through in the LTP specifically related to activities that were looking to get rid of the slash on the beach. So that's not a common occurrence, and we would hope that we don't have to do it very frequently. It's, from my understanding, not necessarily a result of the normal winter occurrence, the way that this airshed specifically is understood to be. So, kia ora.
Thank you. Councillor Agora Brown.
Kia ora, thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess I want to follow on from a few conversations in this room with page 683. Firstly, noting that Councillor Robinson has asked, could this go to some formal conversation with tangata whenua? Is that an issue that you know, in respect to timeliness? I know we often kind of get hit up with how long things take to get to. But in that first paragraph of 31 under tangata whenua, whilst I'll appreciate there's no legal requirement, but we send again a message that tangata whenua have to fit within a framework that we're always tasked with being partners in our relationship and our role with Te Tiriti. So I understand that's noted there's no legal requirement, but in a relationship space, I believe that this is something that, as the second part of that conversation notes, iwi are very interested. And I'm sure all iwi are, it's just that the Runanga Nui o Ngāti Porou supported kōrero. Then we go down to paragraph 32. The gazetted process does not require legal public consultation. At this time, respect to that time, yet we have people with interest from our community, and we're elected representatives to ensure that their voice in the mix is heard. So, you know, again, legally required commentary when we have got interest groups. Because in the next 34 paragraph, it's climate change impacts and implications, which we know that we have huge groups of young people asking us to show leadership and to call out this space. So I just thought those three paragraphs running together qualified that we need to ensure that when we make these decisions to move a report to get to it, that we aren't just we're not just mitigating ourselves for the sake of it, but we're actually doing justice to those who have high interest in this area. I live in a part of the region that has got considerable dust issues. I ring in from time to time, but when we're talking about air quality from a Te Ao Māori framework, which we're going to get more training on, that comes into the concepts of how we consider all things to do with Te Ao. So I guess I'm supporting Councillor Robinson in the can we please seek an actual recommendation that we will do a community or a iwi or do right by this conversation, because I do feel we would get a little bit of pushback that we've kind of marched on as we do, because we've got to get to. But I just think out of due respect and our role as Te Tiriti partners and also our role as elected to all the community, it's important that we don't just march on. So I'm kind of keen to see this paper taiho so I can get recommendations from staff that those concerns are met, albeit that some people think, oh, oha. But I just think that's how I'm feeling as I read this and the conversation. Kia ora.
Thank you. Kia ora, through your worship. So there are two things here. There's an immediate issue that we are trying to deal with in terms of not having an airshed. The second one is around our engagement with iwi and participation around significant policy. So in terms of the second aspect, part of the TRMP review, we will be establishing a joint kind of decision-making advisory group on that. We are scheduling bilateral hui with our iwi partners so that we can be clear on those joint actions and policies that are relevant and how to get meaningful engagement around that. So I hear what both Councillor Robertson and what you are saying, but this is an urgent need now, but we can address that going forward through the long-term plan. I'm sorry, the TRMP, which is a long-term plan.
Thank you for that, Madam C. I guess we recognise that today, but I just am just wanting that noted that if we do have those scheduled frameworks, then that's great. And I appreciate that the matter needs to be dealt to today. So thank you for that.
I realise that our issues on air pollution aren't significant around here, but the unusual thing is that I was just wondering about reduction. And it seems strange that if someone does want to pollute the air a bit more, they can find someone that's reducing. So there's no net result of reduction. So I just wondered, why someone would not sort of say, try and get some aims at reduction there rather than holding a net position. So that's the first thing. And the second one was around airsheds in townships. Is there any consideration around geology of, I think, of the likes of Toko that would hold its air in on the geography of the region? So it might be a different case to somewhere else where it's more open.
Yes. So through you, Chair, the mic can pick me up from here, but yes, when airsheds are set, topography, geography is one of the many matters that's taken into account, hence why we had to get some external advice before putting some tentative lines around an interim airshed for Gisborne. In terms of the why people aren't looking to reduce reductions, I guess that's more a question for individual operators, but at certain operations it's very hard to reduce emissions and still undertake your activity. And the whole science of offsetting and demonstrating that you are delivering a meaningful and measurable offset is very complicated and no doubt expensive too.
Councillor Robinson, Burdett, Dowsing.
Thank you. So Ms. Noble, I understood you to say that existing consents will continue in the interim while this is resolved, until this is resolved.
That's true, but they can't make any changes to their current operation. So if they wanted to expand into a new area or process more, that none of that can be actioned until this is resolved.
Can you explain with the Wet Gisborne Limited, is that a renewal or is that
No, that's a new consent.
So that's the only new one of the 5?
Well, all of the 5, I believe, are changing their operations. So I don't know the extent to which they're constrained. To have to probably ask Ms. Montgomery for that level of detail.
I would have to, through you, Madam Chair, I would have to go back to the consents and provide that in a separate email or something like that. They're usually quite extensive applications.
Councillor Burdett and then Dowsing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm aware of all these operations apart from the wet. First thing I want to say, there's a large number of people employed by these organisations. We can't delay all the time, because it has an impact on employment. And secondly, in relation to what our CEO has told us, she's right, but in the main, it is hapu that deal with these companies in terms of resource consents. Not our parent body, but hapu. And in some cases, they have been responsible for blocking consents because they don't agree for best reasons best known to them. But just to clarify the point, the question I want to ask is, how long will these delays go on for before we make a decision? I mean, when you say they're changing their operation to account for, and I know how dusty these operations are, it's a difficult one, but you've got jobs at stake here, many jobs.
Thank you for that. So no delays?
Well, in terms of if we go out to consult, how long that delay would be, it's hard to say because we don't know what the consultation would raise. I imagine it would raise a lot of issues outside the scope of what we're discussing here, because people would want to be looking at how do we improve air quality, which would be my response if I was consulted on this. And that's a much bigger topic than what we're looking at here, which is creating an airshed to kind of identify where we know we have an issue and to manage that. What we really want to be consulting on is how we manage that air quality issue. And that will be as part of the TRMP review. So as to how long it could delay the process, could be 4 months, could be 6 months. I really don't know.
Councillor Dowsing, did you want to keep your right of reply?
No, it's fine. I just had a point for clarity. Yeah. So just on the Ministry of Environment page around airsheds, if we create, this becomes a sub airshed and we do maintain the regional airshed stays in place. So this is our only monitoring point in region anyway. So it's creating an airshed where our only monitoring is sensible, but yeah, there's no outcome for the greater airshed anyway. It's essentially doing nothing because there's no monitoring. So I would imagine that at some stage we'll have to address the fact that there's no monitoring in that airshed. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. And that's where, as Ms. Montgomery pointed out, where we've been requested to look at, because there may be, there is a perception that there is an issue in certain places, and that would need to be further investigated before we could know the full extent to and the management of it.
Councillor Parehinga.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Yeah, really good discussion in regards to the airsheds. I was looking at this paper. I thought it was very much something that we should implement, and I still feel that way. The nature of the discussion around the table reminds me of a discussion that we had about some piece of council infrastructure that we're going to be putting on Whenua, and we had decided to have a conversation with some of our iwi partners about it. And the reply back from one of our iwi partners was, why would we want to have a discussion with you about your council furniture on our land? Which was kind of a funny way of saying, bro, can we elevate these conversations to something higher? We're not really keen on having to give our time to have a conversation about this infrastructural thing and this compliance thing and this policy thing. This is where we want our conversations to be. And Ms. Noel, before you had said it, that was actually where I had landed. The bigger conversation is to ensure that our iwi partners are included on a higher level scale about air quality. At the moment, we don't have the mechanism to monitor this, and we need to, and part of that is around establishing this airshed. I'm comfortable with supporting this paper because of that, but I really do behoove us to get our and this organisation to get our A's into G's in order to be able to have robust conversation via the TRMP in order to uplift our air quality standards to meet iwi aspirations. Thank you, Worship.
Okay, I think we have thrashed this out. So I am going to ask for the vision, because that is what Councillor Robinson wants. I have a mover in councillor Dowsing, seconder in councillor Seymour. Hands up that approve this application. Okay, against? So it is noted councillor Akwater Brown, councillor Robinson. Is that it? Did I miss anyone? No. Okay, we're going to have a cup of tea and then we're going to come back for another big discussion, our chief executive report and our three waters discussion, because by then it will be 10:30 and the embargo will be lifted.
But it actually pertains to a mihi that I gave earlier on in regards to our draft trade waste bylaw and the hearing thereof. One person that I forgot to acknowledge, much to my own shame, was well, actually a group of people. We're the staff that supported us, but Councillor Seymour had acknowledged Coral in regards to her robust support of us. But one that I really wanted to acknowledge was Chris Gilmore. He did a fantastic job at helping us pull all of the information together. He was available to us in order to be able to work out the finer details, going down to even a singular word and using the appropriate word in order to be able to land the recommendations that were, or the intention that we wanted to land, and helped us really shape those recommendations that we ended up passing. So I just really wanted to acknowledge Chris and the staff in regards to the work that they did in order to help us as a hearings committee land the robust decisions that we did. Thank you very much, Your Worship.
Thank you for that. Okay, councillors, I take you to page 688 of 727. We are now on the Chief Executive's report, and I will open it for discussion. We will come to leave the Three Waters discussion for after this, just general questions that you have in regards to the Chief Executive's report. Councillor Foster.
Thank you. I've got a few questions here. The first one on, and a good report, really good of all the things that are happening, exciting things. On page 705, number 4, it's probably just, it's only minor really, but the fact that our parking is dropped since COVID, I just want to make sure that we got this right, because it's gone back to its normal process of being $2 an hour and not being subsidised like it is saying here still. On number 4 at the end, as a result of COVID-19, fees have reduced from $2 to $1 per hour, and free parking from 3 p.m. has been implemented. Well, that's been and gone. But that's that one there, if we can correct that. And then we go to page 707, and I'm so excited about this. Panukutu Titirangi Summit, and this is the first I've seen of this, and so I'm so excited to see that we're looking at a proposed and getting a consent in August of a proposed plan for a structure that we were talking about on Kairi Hill in conjunction with the with Ngāti Oneone and also with the Astronomical Society. So and I see a cafe, and I see all these other different facilities up there, and I'm a frequent visitor of the summit and love the area. I know we were talking a long time ago about a proposed structure that was going to be put up there, and we had all different ideas, but to see it now in place and going into consent. But my question is, I mean, we did have the funding originally, but I thought that funding had been since taken away. So have we now got the funding to achieve this this great?
Through worship, no, we don't have the funding to build. We have the funding, so we did have, the funding was removed by PGF and reprioritised, as were many projects across New Zealand at that time. This was one of the impacted ones. So originally we had, I think it was about $6 million towards this project. We renegotiated to enable us to get to shovel ready. So that means to fund the design up to resource consent. So that is the money that we are using now that has been fully funded through the previous PGF fund. So we will then need to go and seek funding for the build.
Yeah, on top of that, so is there another avenue that we can apply for funding for this, another government funding scheme that could, like the PGF, that we can apply to get this done?
Yep, so we, in conjunction with a number of regional projects, we would put forward to central government. They've redesigned the PGF to be a regional development fund. So we would look at those opportunities and avenues, but we want to do it in a way that's a coordinated approach across all the priority projects, which include things like housing, our community facilities.
Yeah. Okay, and now I've got a couple other questions too. I'll do the whole lot. 708, and it's about the inanga habitat management. And I see we've got eight people learning about the inanga habitat work. Have we? Is it? I know inanga and whitebait are the same.
Thank you for that.
But is there? Have we had quite a lot of inanga in our region, and have we? There's obviously been a decline, and are we seeing an increase? I mean, this is.
Who is the whitebait? The inanga specialist, please stand up now.
Through you, your worship, I'm not claiming to be an inanga specialist, but the habitat restoration works and the fish passage works are in early days. So I think it would be too early to see an increase in numbers as of yet. But watch this space, and we will hope for the best.
Okay, great. Everyone will be waiting for August for the whiteback season to happen. And the other one was just 713, the Wigan Bridge. It had Labour Weekend as for the deck, and I'm just thinking that was a long time ago. Is it taken this long for the deck to be in?
What page are you on?
713.
730.
Yeah, it should have been Queen's birthday. That's what I thought. Yeah, but
Okay. Mr. Wilson.
Through your worship, it was done over Queen's birthday weekend.
yeah, okay. So we need to change Labour Weekend to Queen's birthday. Yep, cool. No worries. Minor. Thank you.
Everything covered. Councillor Cranston, then Councillor Gregory.
Yeah, thank you. Page 694, health fluoridation, drinking water amendment bill. At our committee meeting last week at the health board, we were talking about the horrific stats from oral health, and it pertained to mostly the coast, but it was really something quite bad, and it was indicated that we had shared responsibilities in that. I know that there's small treatment plants, sort of Te Puia, Ruatora coming. I guess they'll be fluoridated, but in saying that, most of it will remain on rainwater tanks and that. So what are our responsibilities to education, I suppose, is where I'm going with this, because I took it back to a 3-year-old's birthday party and asked all the parents, and they were rural parents, what advice do you get on oral health for your kids? And they said nothing. So it might be that if you believe in fluoride and that's going to help the oral health of our children, and that there does need to be some sort of shared education out there to water tank users that, hey, if you've got kids, you've got to be aware that, and the stats were terrible on what was happening with oral health. So I just wondered, it might be something we need to liaise with the health board and say, well, okay, we do need to have some education strategy, or we do need to do something in this area. So yeah, just that. And the other thing was 697, which was with the rating of Maori land, how are we going with our valuers, because it's going to be quite tricky with Papakainga. I mean, most of the rating values are based on, values operate on a basis of sold properties, of getting their values. But with Papakainga, which is popping up all over the place at the moment, it's going to be a difficult rating base for that sort of property. So are they sort of starting to look at how they will handle that rating challenge, really?
I just quickly comment on the fluoridation, and potentially Mr. Wilson might want to add to it. But in our understanding is that, so for the community supplies, those are the ones that we are directly responsible for. So we've got our smaller water supplies substituted, for example, and that's where we will take responsibility for the fluoridation of that. With the water regulator, Taumata Arawai, they will be putting in place those standards that the other suppliers will be responsible to implement. So it is, in terms of that education campaign, we were of the understanding that health is directly responsible now for the standards that will be applied. There will be a regulator which will be the council's responsibility in that space. So Dave might want to comment on that, and then I'll go to Pauline for the Māori valuations.
Through your worship, as the chief executive's outlined, the requirement sits with us as a registered drinking water supplier to make sure our water has got fluoride in it. So that will apply to any of our new ones. We'll have to meet the drinking water requirements as set by Taumas Arawai. When it comes to the education campaigns and those things, that sits with the DHB and MOH. It's not something that we enter into. We just operate the plants. We don't enter into the education campaign things.
Thank you.
As to what the values of the land may be, it's a recurring, we are assessing it as we go. So for argument's sake, as the Act comes into play on the 1st of July and some of the things associated with it, we are assessing based on that information, is any of our existing properties would be considered and falls under this threshold. We have identified a number of properties that already do that, and we have the ability to immediately say it's non-rateable in some of the circumstances. And the impacts of that and where we go on and have those additional assessments, we will be coming back to council just to say where we're at and what are the ongoing rating implications as well. What do we need to do in order to recognise that? As a sort of a heads up, one of the recognised is at the 30th of June, even though it doesn't take in the 1st of July, we will have to write off about 600K of land that will be non-rateable. So as I say, we will keep you up to date and the implications as we work through the process.
Councillor Dowsing. Oh, Councillor Gregory, did you have your hand up? Sorry, you go first and then Councillor Dowsing, sorry.
Thank you. I have two questions. The first one was where on 678 bylaws, what's happening with the heavy traffic bylaw that we were discussing a while ago. And the second one is relating to that bridge there where I see on page 711, 1.7 million from the lotteries fund, but there's more money being sought. How much money more is being sought for the rest of it, and where from, and is that going to get started before that? Or?
So for your worship, the heavy traffic bylaw, we delayed that. So that will be coming, I think we're looking at September for that to come back to council. The bridge, we are going to be seeking approximately to get some of the interpretive panelling right as it stands. And Dave, Mr. Wilson and the team have been working through, we can get the structure up, but we want to make it fit with the surrounds. So kind of led by Mr. Tupara, who will be working with our team to source some funding.
Thank you.
Councillor Dowsing, thank you.
Thank you. This was around the Titirangi Summit project as well. It's highlighted by Councillor Foster. One of the first times we've seen this, and it'd be really good to get an update on this project.
What page are you on?
707.
707.
If it's 31st of August to seek a consent, it'd be good to get the plans past the council, have the stakeholders come in and talk to us about the progress of the project and how they got to the design they've got. It'd be really interesting to be made aware of that project. Likewise, an update on the pool would be great. Thank you.
Just for your worship checking, I'm pretty sure we had some images in my last chief executive report, but that haven't changed much from the initial interpretive design that you would have seen when Ngāti Waianae presented it to council. But we can work with them to come back with some further design information. And in terms of the coal redevelopment project, we're looking at a launch of the design come this in July as we progress to occupying the site and commence building August.
Councillor Dowsing, we had an update on the pool last week and I was supposed to update you. It was when we had the Trust Rafferty interviews. I did not do that. So I will talk to you. I just realized when you ask.
Apology to the Chief Executive staff, then I understand that's already been done.
Absolutely. Sorry, I just realized when you asked that question, I was supposed to talk to you because we did it while you were away. Councillor Sheldrake and Seymour.
Thank you. Page 711, just the midway to Waipawa cycleway. I know this has come up multiple times by Councillor Cranston, but 4 years, $1 million has been sitting in the budget. It's probably burning a hole in someone's pocket. Where are we at, please?
Mr. Wilson, thank you.
Through your worship, we have been spending against that $1 million that we have with Trust Rafferty. So they have funded the works that have been undertaken from the the Learn to Ride Park down towards past the Millennium Wall, the concrete section that was put in through there. So a few $100,000 has been spent on that. We have also been working with Trust Rafferty around some of our access work roads that we've been doing on Waipawa. So we have been working through with Trust Rafferty.
So is it, what about, between the end of the concrete works to the river mouth?
Through your worship, as previously reported to council, we were going to do that. Council was undertaking that work on behalf of Trust Rafferty. However, we've agreed to not do that as there were some issues with the landowners that needed to be resolved and we were unable to get a consent through given some of the things that need to happen there. So it's been put on hold at the approval of Trust Rafferty until the landowners are able to resolve some of the issues that they have there.
Councillor Seymour. Microphone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Page 707, with respect to the Titirangi Summit, where questions have already been asked. My recall from the discussions we've had over years is that the terms of the gifting of that hill, there was to be no commercial activity. So reading that there's to be a cafe, can someone or the Chief Executive please explain how that's going to be captured? And I support Councillor Dowsing asking for a more comprehensive update because we have only seen small sketches, and to make Councillor Dowsing feel assured, we actually only had a verbal update. So a substantive update on what exactly the pool is going to look like, how it will fit, what the impact is on the other land around it, especially in light of the fact that we know the holding company have taken away their cabin. So I just think that would be timely to have a full paper on the pool and some timeframes in it. We've had verbal updates. And I'd be really keen to know how a cafe is going to function on a hill if we still have the requirement that no commercial activity be undertaken. Thank you.
Thank you, through your worship. So with regard to Titirangi, yes, it was in my March CE report with the images and the layout of that. And in terms of the gifting deed, yes, there are issues around that. So there were restrictions on it, as you rightly pointed out, in terms of commercial activities. We are working on, so under the gifting deed, it was a freezing work association. Not the right term, but that no longer exists. So there's nobody left to hang that to. We will be looking at that and considering the gifting deed and whether we apply to the minister for potential other uses there. But we part of the business case that was put forward that council had seen, looking at commercial activities was in that initial business case, tourism activities, etc. So it's still something that we are working with Ngāti One on, and anything that requires any changes or amendments to a deed requires us to come back to council anyway, so you'll get an update on that as we progress through. Can I just say in terms of the pool, the the project control group have met. They have some information around the updates, and so on that group is Councillor Cranston, Councillor Sheldrake. Our intention is to be providing those updates back to council once they've been through the project control group.
Supplementary, Madam Chair, with respect to Titirangi, a gift is a gift and often comes to an organisation with some parameters attached, and we completely understand that a long way down the track sometimes there is a need to make those changes, but I think that we are not being transparent. I mean I know that it's been mentioned before, and you've mentioned again today, but we're embarking on a process of allowing people to think they're going to do X, Y on Titirangi without actually following up with the proper process if we are going to make an effort to change the deed. So I think we need to be a bit more transparent about that and bring that material back to council with some stepping stones of what is going to be required to make those changes to a deed of gift, if that's what's necessary. Because otherwise it's simply not fair if we've got some people, and well done to Ngāti Waianae, taking a real interest in what they might be able to do commercially. And we know we've got to do something about that, and yet we don't, as a council, we've not seen a timeline around how that's going to look, what's going to be achieved, how much it's going to cost, who's going to do it, and all those other things that are part of that kind of process. So I think that needs to come back in detail, please, Madam Chair.
Yep, through your worship, I would hate the media to go away thinking that there hasn't been any information provided to the public that's been transparent around this. We've provided comprehensive reports in the past that outlines the restrictions around the gifting deeds, the options that council might want to take. We just haven't done that for a while because the project's been, working away around the design part. So we will bring that information back, but there definitely has been information that's been in the public domain on this.
A long time ago, though. Now we're seeing what it looks like. We need it together. Thank you.
Sorry, to be fair, we haven't really seen what it looks like. We've got a tiny thumbnail that's not giving us any more information, and two contradicting layouts from the aerial view. So we haven't had a. That's from the previous report.
That's the design. I was referring to the gifting deed
that
we've had reports, and we've also had Mr. Tupara present to council in a public domain around the look of the building on the top of Titirangi. So take granted that maybe it's been a long time and some of you have forgotten that information, so we will bring it back to you.
Sorry to bang on, but I do think we need a solid report that does have the current potential sketches rather than just the thumbnail, as Councillor Dowson's called it. And then, and I mean, we have all had these piecemeal bits. Now it needs to be pulled together if it's going to be something that's going to happen, and the timeframes for making the decisions.
Yes, I've noted that, and I'll bring our partners now to Waianae to also discuss that with council as well.
Thank you.
I'm on page 698, and I want to talk about the regional speed management plan, and I'm very glad. What's that? I am very glad that we have listened to submitters, because I have had, I would say, hundreds of people chat to me about their concerns about our blanket approach. So I'm very happy to see that we are doing a more targeted approach when we talk about speed control. And I do, Mr. Wilson, I note that there are some areas that you lifted out, and I'm sure it's not an extensive list of where there will be special areas that you would look at specific speed restrictions. But I urge you to please take a good look at this area in front of the museum, the Stout Street bit. I know you're starting work there shortly, or planning to do the speed control in Stout Street. But when you look at speed restrictions as well, this area, I receive feedback probably weekly from cars parked up, and this area also need a good look at. So thank you to staff. I look forward to the report to see what we are proposing and what areas how we will deal, because we receive requests for speed reduction often, and then we say, oh, we'll have a collaboration and have a whole of region look. We now have had a whole of region look and made some recommendations which we are not going with. So I don't want us to stop addressing those areas that really came to us and raised the very valid concerns, because it is safety. So thank you for that. Do I see other hands? Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just in relation to your last comment, do we ever get requests for speed increases?
No.
I must.
I'll ask for it in front of your house.
Look, just to really wrap up the Titirangi Summit corridor, I do note that the report says the project is currently on track to lodge the resource consent by 31st of August. That's less than, well, it's 2 months today. And so if we are going to resolve the issue of the gifting deed prior to that, there's money being spent on a pathway which may become hobbled if the issue of commercial activity is not resolved. And it just seems a bit, that's what I'm after. Not foolhardy, but overly confident to put a time frame of 31st of August when actually a fundamental issue around a commercial activity hasn't been resolved.
Your Worship, the commercial activity component isn't. So if that became an issue around the commercial activity, the cafe wouldn't, go ahead in terms of the gifting deed. So it's the main primary function of it is still a gathering space that is consistent with the gifting deed. The cafe part is ancillary to the, so it can be taken away if required, or not operating as a commercial business. I'm going to throw it over to Deanne because she's been working very closely on this project too, and she might want to comment on it.
Through you, Your Worship. Nadine is correct in that we've been working through this process for a long time, and it's been captured through numerous reports, previously through regular reporting through Navigate Tairāwhiti. The concept looks a little different, but it is the one that was presented and developed by Mr. Nick Tupara some time ago. In regards to the consent process, so we are working through that application process now, closely with Ngāti Onioni, and there is awareness that while we're considering an activity, a ceiling if you like, through having some sort of commercial or hospitality activity there, that's within the application consideration, but it might not be where we end up through that deed process. They are working in parallel, and that's to meet our funder requirements about getting this project to shovel ready. They're very insistent that we get to that point by the end of this calendar year.
Yes, Councillor Badette. Microphone.
CEO, very comprehensive report. Page 296, second
696.
from the bottom, local government rating of Whenua Māori Amendment Bill. And I don't know whether, well, you're the boss. How's government going to, or how's council going to enable this to happen? Because I assume, reading that, it relates to contiguous properties, and this will have quite a huge effect right across the district.
Pauline.
So that was part of the discussion I mentioned before. We come back to you and say, what does this act mean? And what does it mean for our district, and what can we do? And what are the areas where we will be assessing and it is applicable, but and the extent of it. So at the moment, as we alluded to before, there's at the 30th of June this year, we've identified properties that will be non-rateable as from the 1st of July. So we've recognised that straight away. As we go through this process, there'll probably be more, and there will probably be other things that fit into this sort of the intent of the Act. And it is at the discretion of the CE for a lot of the things to be able to take it at a faster rate than what it need, where we need to be. So we'll keep you informed. It is a sort of an emerging sort of the field and what are the definitions, and part of that is also assessing our region and where we are and getting that information. But we definitely will be keeping you informed of this process.
Councillor Foster.
Just back on the speed management plan, I just note in here, we've got townships, CBD and Makarori Beach, but I would actually like to have a focus on, not just on Makarori Beach. Kairi Beach is, there's major problems with speed on Kairi Beach and also in every other beach in the region. So if we're going to have a speed management plan about a beach, I would like to see it across the region, on all beaches actually, so not just Makarori Beach. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Worsnop.
Thank you. And just following on from what Larry's just said, some of the lovely people that were at the Waianae consultation last week were also at the bull sale on Monday, and it came through really strongly, and that bollards are great, but we want restrictions in place for vehicles on the beach more than anything. So I think that that's widely held view, and I accept that it comes with some requirements to speak and reach, widely into our community. But yeah, just second that. So my points were a request actually with regards to relationships on page 700. I was hoping that we could have added to the relationships reported in here some of our other key relationships, those perhaps with our council organisations, council controlled organisations, and in particular, I think there's a need, and we're sort of starting to see it as the focus comes onto water and going into a TRMP review, we were going to need to work up some strategic relationships to manage in terms of whether it's the Chamber of Commerce, whether it's Federated Farmers, whoever it happens to be. There's going to be an enormous body of work pulling together these people who are going to be really critical to getting our TRMP through at the least cost and with as few hiccups and hang-ups and appeals as possible. So I was just wondering if that could be deepened, I suppose, going forward, because I know you have these. It's just good for us to see them. And just also on page 700, Te Kahupatu Kaikiri, just reading that, it reads as though it's very managerial and we're just going to receive a manifesto and rock on from there. My presumption when we adopted the decision was that it would include the whole organisation, including this table. And so my question is, we haven't had details of that since it was adopted. For example, what's the budget? What's the scope? What's the, what is the manifesto? So I'd really like some of that information, please. And lastly, detailed phasing of the TRMP on page 708. Are we able to get an in-depth look at how we are going to structure that body of work? Because I note phase 1 and phase 2, but within that, there's an enormous amount of information and huge work streams. And because we frequently get a lot of feedback around what the community think are their priorities, it would be really good to get some or to be able to feed in as to whether or not we see that reflected in our phasing approach. That would be awesome. Thank you.
Just make some comments. Yes, so the relationships do expand out. Sometimes there are comments around trust tied apathy, GHL or Eastern Group, depending on where the focus has been. So yep, we'll make sure that we capture some of those activities going forward as well when they're happening. Thank you. Good point that you raise around Te Kahupatu Kaikiri. We fed that back in terms of it needing to, because the resolution was sitting around this table, and so that it does very much need this table to support, to enable it through the organisation, because it's where the decisions get made and a lot of the issues were raised with regard to that. So we've been working with the advisory group and trying to get it back up to where we need to reposition it so that council owns it around the table. So thank you for that. And in terms of the TRMP work, we have got a workshop that we're planning for August that will cover what we're talking about.
Councillor Akwater Brown, Cranston, Gregory.
Thank you, Worship. I want to stick with the relationship page. So page 700, Kerry has unpacked a couple of my queries to this. I'd underlined a potential session with councillors has also been planned. So I think, if I can say this, thank you first to our CE for a thorough report and covering off multitudes of exciting and a whole lot of change, really. My theme song has been Change, Go and Calm, and my hair changes as much as the policies that seem to be coming out of central government right now. So thank you for keeping us a step of all of that. But a potential session, I just really believe that in relationships, we are in a change model of the levers in a time space where we know the power of good relationships, key with our staff, with our role as elected members to this table and to our community. So I believe our staff have been, I just feel really heartened that we are on a trajectory to being more relatable to each other and what we carry, the responsibilities, because I'm always in awe of the work that is happening behind the scenes all the time, and then the reports come out, but we're getting there. So I love the statement in this the first paragraph that we may require change for council to become the treaty partner it aspires to be, and we're all, I believe, aspiring to be better in our relationship with mana whenua, tangata whenua, minority and other cultural diverse groups within our community. It's been a long time coming, but anyway. The hui next point down with ngā hapu o Tokamaru. I want to endorse and support this kaupapa and moving ahead in a joint agreement. Again, aspiring to be good te tiriti partners. These kōrero, I was just blown away to learn so much about Tokamaru Bay that I had no idea. And I believe as part of my journey is that I'm learning more about my rohe, my te tairawhiti, and not just claiming my puhi kaiti roots, but yeah, learning more. So thank you for that, Nadine, and the work that's happening there. Totally endorse the kōrero around our anti-racism working group. Again, it's been heartening to sit with like-minded folk with reports and governance material, and I see other councillors picking up research documents and looking into frameworks around our place and story. So again, proud to be part of that kaupapa. Thank you, everyone. Page 696, I just want to ask how we feel in respect to all these changes, te arotake, the future for local government review. I think it's really important that local governments, councillors, individuals, you know, be involved in this kaupapa. It's about us, it's about our locality, but about our role in the reform space. And I want to endorse that we do get to any opportunities, because it's had some sounding sessions. Wasn't sure if we got feedback from that sounding session locally. Did we? Were we a part of that sounding session in June, which is this month? So I'm just interested to know if we did have some soundings and how that went. And is our voice, te tairawhiti's voice, are we strengthened and strong to that push forward? It's exciting times. I'm really excited about what good change can be. I don't want it to be more of the same. And lastly, 699. It's just really a comment to thanking the civil defence team, our CDM, our people, that when issues arise within region, the education that's happened around region in regards to tsunami, the zone maps, all of that stuff, you know, more communities are getting a little bit more self-sufficient in this space because of the mahi that our CDM team do. I note recent flooding events, etc. But we look at our nation, we know we're all on shaky isles, etc. But I think the work that they're doing and the continued work in this space is to be applauded, because individuals have to take responsibility for their own whānau and respect to their role, but often they look to us civically to lead that. So I just want to thank them for all the work, and I appreciate everything that's done in that space. So namahi to you, CEO, congratulations for all of this, and we look forward to what's to come. Kia ora.
Councillor Cranston and then Councillor Gregory.
Yeah, thanks. I was going through the activity report and I saw there the Makaraka Cemetery headstone restoration. I thought, oh, that's ages ago. Anything happened there? And then I went to the top of page 712 and it says completed. So we've got that project in progress and completed. But just on that, and it was a while ago, and where it landed was the headstones coming out and getting put into storage and that. And then from that point of time, I'm pretty sure I was quite invested in that, and I'm pretty sure we've had nothing on that. So I'm just curious to know where it has landed now. The headstones did come out, and there was a lot of unsurety about who would pay for the storage of those headstones and how long it would happen there. So it wouldn't be a bad idea to get an end of project report or something just to close that off, if you like. And the other thing I wasn't sure about was big belly bins and dry vault toilet. What is that? That's on the list as well, activity projects. It just says big belly bins and dry vault toilet, 189,000.
That's the funding that was for the toilet in Tokomato Bay. Was that not the funding that we got for the dry vault toilet in Tokomato Bay Wharf? Yeah.
Yeah, and the dry vault toilets. It was TIF funding. So that would be completed too, wouldn't it?
What's that?
No, still going. Okay, all right.
Councillor Gregory.
Thank you. I'm just on 696, wanting to speak about the hocus pocus, that is the Three Waters. Are we allowed to now?
Yes, so are all questions covered in Nadine's report? Because then we will move on. You will see that Heather handed out the slides. It is not embargoed anymore, so we will have an in-depth discussion now. So do you still want to ask questions in regards to Nadine's report? Now is your last go. Yes. Yes. So, okay. So now we're going to move on. We'll move it later because I might add a resolution here. So we have, and it's moved by Burdett and Warsnop, but we might change the recommendations once we finish this discussion. So as everyone is aware, the government yesterday pre-released to mayors and councillors across the country their intention of the Three Waters and what they plan to do. There are maps here for those of you that were not part of that, showing we are the slither on the left, and part of the South Island is part of Entity C. And they say we are part of a group of 900,000 people. So at this stage, the floor is open for discussion because we need to decide how we're going to go forward. I sent that email to all councillors a few days ago showing what has happened in Northland. They have since opted out. I've just opened up the New Zealand Herald to see if that is what is covered about this, and I'll quickly forward it to all of you. Minister Nanaya Mahuta outlines Three Water fix for a system in crisis. So I'll just flick this onto you, and then I'm going to open the floor and we will work through this and come to make sure we have a stance which we will take. Before we open the floor, I'll quickly share with you, I have not had the opportunity, obviously, to talk to our iwi chairs to see what consultation happened there, because the last time I worked with DIA was to email them and say, hey, you have not talked to our iwi chairs. They then wrote back a month later saying, we are meeting with your iwi chairs. And the day after the proposed date, I caught up with the iwi chairs who said no one met with them. So there's still that hanging, that it would be very important for me to make sure I touch base with our partners as well, because this is a region-wide, it will have an impact on all of us going forward. So I just wanted to say that I have not had any feedback or any catch-ups yet. Okay, floor is open.
Can I just ask whether it would be helpful to have a presentation or council officers to run through this before we get into it, because many of us were not able to access it online yesterday, and so we've got 2 bits of paper. It's a really important issue, so I think it would be good if we got a council officers presentation first, and then we open it up to questions.
Well, council officers only also saw that at 4 p.m. yesterday, so they didn't prepare a presentation. This is what I asked Donna, just to print off what DIA sent through last night. So we can talk through this, but there won't be a detailed report, because this is more me bringing this to the table than staff, me bringing it at the last minute.
Yeah, that's all right. I mean, I think the thing to remember, this is a DIA proposal, not a staff proposal. And the headliners are really the key concerns are around 4 water entities for New Zealand, the boundaries where they've shown we are at, and the assumptions they've made around reform or no reform for our region. So there is a dashboard page which we haven't, I don't think we've got there, that is relevant to. Oh no, yeah.
So if you take a look at entity C, this dashboard bit.
So for Gisborne District Council, it's saying that for Gisborne District Council, the financial average cost per annum with reform would be 1,200, and without reform it's 8,690. And if you went to somewhere like Napier, because you can change the area that you look at, and I recently looked at their long-term plan, and they've got billions and billions of water issues down there, and there the cost is Napier is 1,200 with reform and 2,500 with no reform. And so I just would want to know where these figures have come from. That's why I said hocus pocus. It just seems like they've plucked it out of the air. And yeah, I just think we should opt out.
So
you can explain with them.
Yes, so Nadine, just give us a quick overview.
And so our team, they did a rough over, they did some base data gathering, and then they did a deep dive with a selection of council, and Mr. Wilson can comment on the type of information that was provided, but it was a lot of information towards the end of last year. They've then modelled what this might look like for each of the regions, and the figures that have been quoted if we opted into the reform in 2050. Year 2051, actually financial year 2051. So we're currently at $990 per household, and in 2051, if we opted into the reform, would be 1,260 per household versus 8,690. And so they give they give little snapshots of that. They've based it purely on an economic model. They haven't taken into account things like Mātauranga Māori, the extent that we're going in terms of treating our wastewater. So this is purely the number crunching around that. Dave, do you want to comment on the information that we provided?
Through your worship, as the chief executive just outlined, we provide a huge deep dive of information to the regulator in Scotland that went through, and we also undertook a very lengthy interview with them to dive into that data. So this was our asset management plans, our renewals profiles, our capital works program, and all of the information that we hold on water basically went across to WICS for them to then come back through. They've made some assumptions based on the information that we provided, and then made some assumptions based on some of the things that other councils have provided as well. So, well, some of us did the deep dive, some only did the short version of it, so they didn't do the full amount that we did. So we provided a huge amount of information to them. They've then put that through their forecasting model that they own, they run, they know the parameters of. We haven't been involved in that part of it. We have raised some questions around the draft, and then we got the numbers yesterday like everybody else did based, and I'll stop talking.
So Councillor Faulkner, Waianae, Warsnop. Were you there in there as well? Okay, Sandra, good.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's very rare for me to feel as strongly as I do about a matter such as this. But this morning, I'm standing here deeply offended on behalf of mana whenua, landowners, in particular, the whānau of Raitaha Incorporated, and indeed Ngā Tamarahiri, from whence our drinking water comes. On behalf of iwi generally in this region, previous governors of our region, GDC staff, both past and present, and my colleagues around this table. We in this region have a reliable and secure water source for the city. We've spent significant resources, both human and financial, in I would suggest, world-class water treatment facility. We've committed to all of these things. We've got our Drainwise program up and running, and our teams, at this time of year, and I acknowledge Dave Wilson and his teams for the amount of work that they're doing in that space. We all acknowledge what goes out to our bay and what we need to do to look after it. I think we need to step well away from this as a region, for the simple reason that what's in here we are addressing, but what's not in here is actually what's most important to our regions. There is no consideration whatsoever given to water security or water storage. In other words, managing this very precious resource that all of our cultural, community and economic well-beings hinge upon. No mention of it whatsoever. And I sense the whole let's build the plane whilst we're trying to fly it. So if that's the case and they're wanting to address significant polluters in our country, if you want to put it at a national level, by all means, let central government address the large metropolitan centres first. Prove to us that the plane can fly and then come back and talk to us in the regions. I would urge you, Your Worship, in the strongest possible terms, and as I say, it is rare for me to reach this level, please, on behalf of our people, of our environment, opt out of this while we can.
So I just want to thank you for that. I've just opened up the press release that was just released from the minister, and it just talks about, how good it is. And then the last two paragraphs, it does say the government will continue to work with the sector, iwi and industry on some of the details to give these transformational reforms the best chance of success. We will be making further announcements in the coming weeks, including a Three Waters reform support package for councils and their communities. Now that councils have received this data, they can now assess the impact of these proposed reforms. We now need to ensure that ratepayers and households understand the beneficial health, environmental, and cost impacts, so we can move forward with greater confidence. Just wanted to read that, but have just come out from the minister. I had on my list Shannon Dowsing. Councillor Dowsing, thank you.
Thank you. I was going to raise this as a point of order, and it's that this is not on our agenda. This is not up for discussion or decision today. We are not opting out today. Staff have had no chance to analyse this. The staff have had no option, no ability to provide us with professional support on this issue. I don't know what we're trying to achieve by discussing it, except for talking about our own personal views on what we heard just yesterday afternoon. I'm uncomfortable discussing it today.
Great. So if you were here at 8 a.m, you would have known that I have said, because this has come out, it is a good opportunity for us. We're not making any decisions, but we are receiving some information from staff. So this is the opportunity for us. I'm not saying we're opting, we definitely, there is nothing, we haven't received any, but this is the opportunity that we are here together, because we won't be together for the next little while. So that is why we ask, can we please add this?
With all due respect, talking about this in an open meeting at council is not the time for it. This is workshop material. This is allowing our staff time to process. It's an enormous decision.
Thank you for that. Yes, and I take that into account. How do councillors feel about what Councillor Dowsing has just raised? Do you feel we should organise a special workshop where we have more time to process this and get more staff information? Staff need steering from us though, And this is what the CEO raised with me last night, is that they would appreciate us having some sort of discussion in order to allow them, just
Madam Chair, I'd just like to go back to what I raised at the beginning, and I absolutely share what Councillor Dowsing said. And the Chief Executive said it wasn't their paper, it was a DIA paper. Nobody's saying it was a council paper.
Good, thank
but
you.
we can't discuss it until we have some feedback from council officers. The role of council officer is give us guidance.
Thank you. I've heard that loud and clear, and I agree. This is why I'm
agree.
asking.
And
Yep,
that's
thank
what
you.
should happen. I'm just supporting what Councillor Dowsing
Thank you. Any other thought? I'm just making notes as we go. Kerry.
The reason I want to speak is because so much has been said already. But it is in support of the fact that this is not the place to make any grand declarations. And the reason for that is because the information that we are given is complicated by an enormous amount of things that sit behind the water environment, the changing legislative landscape. For example, these numbers, the alarming $8,000 per household, that will probably presume that our entire region becomes compliant with the water services bill, which includes every connected user that supplies water to more than 2 households. So that includes every farm, that includes all of our tiny villages. So that is a massive assumption that is presumed to have occurred many years from now, hence the enormous number. In addition to that, Taumata Arawa is tasked with making sure that we meet those targets, whether we opt in or whether we opt out. If we opt out, we have an economic services regulator who is going to chase us up from behind and say you are compelled to spend this or this or this. So the picture that we are being presented with is nowhere near as simple as I like this idea or I hate this idea. It's very, very complicated. It requires probably a whole series of workshops. And for not one second, I don't think should our community think that it is as simple as we like it or we don't. I don't dispute the fact that we need to have these conversations in the public arena, and I would really encourage our media to continue covering this topic, because our community need to have this conversation and they need to have it with us as well. But this should be purely, this is what we tasked with looking at, this is what's come to council, the decision isn't now.
Thank you for that. Thank you for raising that, Councillor Dowsing. So what we are going to do then is talk to staff. You need to let us know how much time council staff need to assist us to talk about this in a way where we can have an informed discussion, because I'm hearing very loud and clear that we need, and what Councillor Seymour said as well, we need, it's brand new information, a lot, and it will change as new announcements are made in the next couple of weeks. So we need some type of guidance from you, how you will support us in this journey.
Through your worship, what's new is the modelling. What's new are the boundaries. The path that this government has been taking in terms of the amalgamation has been really clear that there are significant positive economic impacts, that we want change in the Three Waters regime. So we only have a part of the puzzle. We have the same part of that puzzle that you do as elected members. And so until we're really clear around what does this mean for debt, transfers, transition arrangements, because one of the lines that we've heard is that no council will be worse off. What does that look like? What does it look like in the context of a local government reform? So there's not a lot more that we can do is start to provide you with information that you haven't already got at the moment, because we have the same information as you. And until we've got all those other questions answered, which is probably the space where you need to be thinking about as councillors, what does this mean for the community? And then we expect that to come out from DIA. Then it's not really a good use of time at this to have a workshop shortly until we're really clear. The other part around this is that the minister is going to make a decision around whether to opt in or not. So, and that's to be in a couple of weeks' time. If you are required to go into the Three Waters then the whole conversation changes. It's about how do we get there as opposed to shall we or shall we not. So my suggestion is let's wait for a couple of weeks until the minister has made a decision or the cabinet has made a decision on whether it's going to be mandatory for councils, because one of the questions that was put yesterday was if Auckland opts out and if Christchurch opts out, what happens? So there are significant implications for the modelling if those big cities opt out. So that, and then the question, then the response also was that the minister will be making a decision around whether it's mandatory or not in a couple of weeks. So my suggestion is we wait until we know where the minister is going with that, and as further information comes out, because this is really just the information that's been provided from all the councils and the economic modelling.
So I've had about 4 or 5 media wanting to ask, you know, what do you say about this? How do you feel about this? And we did receive those speaking points from Local Government New Zealand, which I use often, saying we are waiting for more information or we'll make a decision once. So are you happy for me to take that stance when I speak to the media, that because it is what we will be doing, waiting for further announcement, waiting to know what the minister is saying, because at this stage we have one piece of a puzzle. Bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think too critically, and it's been alluded to, our iwi partners. You need to talk to them, you and Nadine, because district-wide, we make a collective decision in terms of these issues. So all I'm suggesting is the sooner the better in terms of you people meeting with the iwi leaders. They are the most critically important factor in this whole thing. Thank you.
Councillor Upwater-Brown, then Councillor Seymour.
I just, when I see us talk about what is on an agenda in respect to you, Madam Mayor, I want to thank you for giving us the space today to have this dialogue, because what it does, it says to our community, we've got something before us that's huge. And you're with us on this right here, right now. We're all on the same opening first page of this new direction, reform-wise. So I want to say thank you. I know that meetings have agenda sets, etc., and that's old school. We're looking at moving and reforming government, you know, and this is the kind of thing. We can be on front of the front page to say we're all looking at this term hocus pocus, if you like, but at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, we have a community that will be wholly wanting to hear what was our stand, our stance and our representative. So thank you, Sandra, for those heartfelt, strong words, because I believe now is the time of transitioning into more transparency about centralised governments, push for regionalised government, which pushes on local government. We're in this kind of interesting time of it. So I thank you for this. I've just read the government's announcement. I was thinking, do I put it on Facebook so everyone else can start to see what's going on? And I think it's important that we as governors, of course, are well informed so we can make those really good decisions. But as we know, our staff are in the same space as us. So ngā to you today for giving us the space to do this. I really appreciate it, and listening to my colleagues, it gives me a good idea of where people are. So kia ora.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Wharehinga, I have ditched him 5 times now, so you go and then.
I was third on the list.
This is the third on the list.
But it's okay.
And then Councillor Seymour.
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Dowsing and Councillor Seymour in regards to us forming up a decision. But I also do, like Councillor Upwater-Brown, I do agree with kind of your first steer, Your Worship, about us having this conversation now, because yes, we are elected and tasked to make decisions, and we can only really make decisions when we're fully informed. And I do agree with the statement of we are waiting for more information. But we also need to remember too that we are politically elected as well. Our community does expect us to speak up in regards to these things. And they do want to know what we think in regards to these things. I did look over the paperwork that was sent out last night, and there are some worrying things in regards to it. And I would like to know the assumptions and all of the other things behind it. I mean, the health and environmental and economic savings that the reforms provide, they sound great. The 50-50 iwi partnership stuff that they're talking about aligns with our country's aspirations in regards to honouring Te Tiriti. However, I feel we already do that in this region. We're having massive conversations with Tā Manuhiri with Marae Taha in regards to Waianae Dam and our water supply. We own a wastewater plant that we worked on conjointly with our iwi partners in regards to that. We've got wetlands in our future. We have all of these aspirational things in the three water space. I worry about what that means for our delivery of those things to meet not only our community aspirations, but our iwi aspirations. Also the fact that we put into an entity C of 900,000 people, when we're 50,000 of those people. When we talk about representation in regards to something like that, that's 5%. You know, that's 5%. We make up 5% of those numbers. And we know what it's like being in a regionally isolated place inside of Aotearoa. And then when we're expected to also represent the more isolated communities of Waipiro, of Topomaru, inside of an already regionally isolated place in our country, it's hard for me to make that stretch in regards to how we have a Tairāwhiti voice, how we have a mana whenua voice that's Tairāwhiti specific inside of this. Again, I am happy to wait for more information, and I am happy to have a concerted conversation with the full information based on what the minister is going to supply in the future. Like Councillor Woolstock, I'm really interested in seeing what the assumptions were in regards to water reticulation for our rural areas. I mean, if some of those things that are in there are about providing water to say every marae and every rural township, okay, it'll be, so that's something that I'm interested in having a conversation about, you know. However, on the surface of it, nothing that I read last night really spoke to me in that way. I do want to applaud you, Your Worship, for, again, yeah, it is a little bit out of the process of things, but however, I think this is entirely appropriate, considering it was just released an hour ago or something, for us to be able to have this discussion. Kia ora.
And I do feel comfortable with us, or why I asked for this, because it is mentioned in her report. I know it's new information, and I agree with what Councillor Dowsing said. We're not making any decisions, but it is also giving us an opportunity to talk about this anyway. What is the outcome of this, Nadine? Councillor Seymour.
I just wanted to follow up with the comments that Chief Executive made in respect to other significant local authorities, their decision. So do you know, through your networks with other Chief Executives, what level of information those groups are using? You mentioned Christchurch, Canterbury. So what level of information have they got that they're going to make their decision on? And are you as Chief Executives having discussions around it? Thank you.
Through Your Worship, it's variable across New Zealand. So some have been actively involved in a steering group that's actively supporting the direction of the reforms. Other Chief Executives aren't so. Others are completely at the opposite ends around that are supporting their mayors or chairs. So it's variable across the place. And there's also been, so some of our staff have also participated in advisory groups of varying degrees. So when they've been looking at stormwater as well, whether that should be in the entities, and people have been primarily shoulder tapped across the sector. Same things happening too around MFE reforms as well. They don't necessarily get vetoed by council or chief executives. They are coming in and having a confidential non-disclosure agreement with staff based on their professional view of the world.
Okay, so we will leave that there. Councillor Robinson.
Really small, simple question. What is the next key date on this time frame that we need to be concerned about?
They didn't give a date. They said roughly in a couple of weeks, the minister will make a decision on whether it's mandatory.
So when we joined, remember a year ago when we joined and we received the $11 million for free, remember how we questioned what is expected, but then it was made very clear that it's an opt-out option at the end of stage one. Things change, and it will be very interesting to see, because I have heard different chatter around different, and like that email I sent to all of you, how the Northland have already, officially, unofficially opted out. So I just think in the next week or two, we're going to see more local authorities being vocal around this. But one thing I take from the minister's press release that I just read to you is, it is now our job to go out and talk to our community in this regard. Because sometimes if you do, I know it says that we now need to talk to our ratepayers, because where else are they going to get this information? When you see something on TV3 News talking about 4 water entities, you don't care. You know what I mean? If you are not really informed. So I do think a big part of our job is to make sure we talk to our ratepayers, we get the information as it is drip fed to us, because at this stage it comes every few weeks. But it is up to us to make sure our community know and our iwi partners know. Councillor Robinson.
Who's leading the discussion with iwi, and sort of what's the urgency around that, please?
So I've had discussions with our iwi chairs in different forum, Rotipura Ora forum, but also at our JMA. And the DIA has had independent, separate consultation with iwi across the country. I'm not sure how well it happened here, because I followed up quite a few times when I picked up that the consultation hui were cancelled or postponed. So I did squeal a bit to DIA, but I still am not 100% sure if they in the end had one more consultation hui with our iwi partners. But I will check in and we will touch base with them in the next few days to see. But I have on record quite a few statements of how iwi feel in regards to this at this stage. Sheldrake, Warsnop, Foster.
Thank you. I just think on the bottom of entity C on the bottom page, just read the disclaimer. It's pretty loose. And to me, just says there needs to have a lot more discussion within the regions.
Yeah, so just listening to that and everyone else's conversation, there's probably, into Tony's point, the what next. I think they're sure wait to hear whether it's compelled or not. But I think it's on us to get a really good picture of, let's just presume that this wasn't even happening. What does our own footprint look like out for the next 30 years? What is our capacity to deliver? We know what the water services bill looks like, roughly. It's, we've got a pretty good idea. What is our capacity to deliver this out to 30 years to a standard that would pass muster? If we're comfortable with that, that's going to guide whether or not we're upset when we find out that we're probably going to be compelled. Because it may well be that we're like, well, actually, we don't really have any other choice.
Yeah.
If we need to understand our own capacity. So that is something we can do even without further guidance. I don't think we need to read too much into the numbers that DIA has, because the modelling clearly has extrapolated a whole bunch of things that they probably really we shouldn't read too much into. I think we're much better placed to lean on the likes of Dave and his team and say, look, give us a deep dive into what did you tell them? You know this information, communicate to us, and then we can form a position that we then communicate with our community, because they're looking to us for guidance. We may have a predetermined position, and that's their position to take. But in the event that they don't and they want that information also, we need to be able to share it with them.
So,
sorry, so a lot of the information that you're just referring to, that the stuff they've taken is from the LTP and your asset management plans. So, and the infrastructure strategy that goes over 30 years outlines the significant challenges that are in there. So they've taken a lot of the assumptions that are in there, and Pauline also provided the financial modelling that would have fed into that. So yeah, that might be a useful starting place as let's walk through the information that was provided. But if we look at where we are with our asset management and the constraints that we've had, that we have relatively low debt, so we're not like some of these other places. That being said, this is a question around what other kind of good quality for low cost can you provide to the rest of the region is what we really want to see. So how can we improve rural water supply with this new model? And are you going to be able to maintain the standard of treatment that we have alongside our iwi partners with this new model? So those are the kind of things that yeah.
One thing that's been niggling at the back of my head is the comment you made earlier, Kerry, about taumata arawai, that if some councils opt out, it might be made very difficult for those ones that decide not to be part because we're not 100% sure what they might expect of us or what qualities or so that's also something to take into account. Anyway, this is the first of lots of these types of discussions we will have because there are heaps of reforms happening. So I want every councillor, I do forward the odd email. Please let me know if you receive these 3 water emails anyway, because you're part of an emailing list, because the last thing I want to do is fill your mailbox with nonsense. So if you receive it anyway, please just flick me an email back saying I am on the mailing list anyway.
Can I just say, for your wish, I think it's been a really helpful discussion for staff, particularly around the degrees within which information needs to be provided back, or your understanding around the reforms and therefore what we need to also be preparing for community engagement around that. So it's really helpful.
Because at the end of this process, once we've looked at everything, we might all say, hey, this is the best for us, or we might say under no circumstances, but we do need to walk that journey first and get feedback from our community as well. Councillor Foster.
It's just one of the things of concern that you mentioned before, and that's within the next 2 weeks, we could be told that it is mandatory. Now, you know, if that's a really stupid thing for government to actually implement when there's no feedback or hasn't been any feedback, and not the lack of information that's coming through to councillors from what we've had so far for councils to make that decision. You know, we're already hearing Northland has opted out from what the information they've got. So really, you know, to put the pressure on councils around the country to say, hey, we're going to make a decision in the next 2 weeks or so, whether it's mandatory or not, is absolutely disgusting. So, you know, we need to be sitting down workshopping this big time, urgently, to signify our stance. And I should imagine every other council would be too. To make it in 2 weeks' time is absolutely just ridiculous.
And through your worship, that's the officials, those were the officials' words to us on the Zoom. It hasn't come from the minister's mouth herself. So she has been adamant in saying that this will always be an opt-in regime. But her officials are saying that there's a decision to be made.
Yes, so it definitely come through that in the next few weeks. No, we're waiting for once the minister announces more information in the next while, we will then have a further discussion, because there's nothing really that we can discuss at this stage aside from the boundary information they've given to us and how many people are in there and what they propose or what they say will be the cost if we don't opt in or if we opt in. So thank you for having a kōrero on that. It is going to be ongoing. Nadine, you'll keep us up to date on what's happening. Please make sure if you've got any questions in this regard, just shout out, send an email. I know it's a lot of uncertainty, but we have to deal with it.
So you're sort of saying a watch and wait brief, but I think there's clear consensus around the table that we, in the meantime, have staff pull together all the relevant information, data, projections, costs, asset, infrastructure issues, because that's really going to help inform us. Yeah.
I think so. My view on this is if the minister makes a decision and says councils opt in, there's not really a lot of point pulling together that information because it's going to happen. So the decision that you're going to be faced with in the future is either one of, shall we do this and let's bring our community on board, and therefore, you know, the information comes in around what this might mean. The other one is we're doing this, and therefore what does transition look like for us? So that's why I say the fundamental for us is around whether it's going to happen or whether it's an opt-in. And so let's just, yeah.
Well, if it's 2 weeks, but we'll stay up to date. Councillor Faulkner.
Thank you, and I hear all of my colleagues' comments around the table. I think what I would like to leave the conversation with is please let us not, there's an old proverb about a boiled frog, and let us not just sit here whilst the water gets warmer and warmer until suddenly we don't have the capacity to make a decision based on the needs of our region and our people and our environment.
Thank you for that. So I have a mover and a seconder for our, it's already been moved. You did it. Bill Burdett, Kerry Warsnop, all in favour, contrary carried. Steve Breen, I welcome you to the table, page 715. Okay, the floor is yours. So councillors have seen this report. Thank you for that. There we go. It's all good, just here. Yep, just leave it right there. 1 metre away, it's all good. So you can take the report is read. Heather is just handing out the stories that was part of this.
Just want to make a comment on this. I think we often don't stop and celebrate the good things that have happened, and this is one of them, to acknowledge the hard work that everyone's put into supporting the redeployment project, the employment opportunities that were created, the jobs that people have gone on to, the relationships that were forged along the way with multi-agency approach to this. So fantastic work by everybody involved. We've got a little video too. If there's anything else, Steve, do you want to add?
Thank you, Your Worship, and Chief Executive. I really just want to add one last thing, and that's the testament to the calibre of the talent in our region. The success of this program rested on 236 people who put themselves forward for employment. They put themselves forward for further training and development while employed. And to have 80% of those that were employed through this program to stay in employment once this program finished speaks to the calibre of the talent we have in our region. So I think that's the real strength that came through. And as has been recognised, the project managers and employers who came together to support those people to further their careers, often into a new sector, and the supporting agencies that enabled the employment to happen. It was a genuine collective effort. And in the report, we give testament to Annie Aranui, the Regional Commissioner for the Ministry of Social Development, and through her leadership, the MSD team went above and beyond to make this program a success. And the program is a real testament to the approach that Annie herself took, and the ability for her team to support the rest of us to deliver speaks high of the overall approach that this region has taken. So there was a lot of depth to the effort, commitment and leadership shown collectively with this program. And I'm very proud to be associated with it. And I think for the council and its leadership role, often in the background, but playing a key enabling role, I think it's not well understood that behind the scenes there were a lot more council staff and management involved to support the projects themselves to deliver. So as I say, a real testament to the whole approach that this region can take, and a real success, particularly for those that were employed in the program. And I think the video will show the strengths of that.
For me, this job means security. It means I can be home in Whirangandamiaki and do the mahi that we do where I grew up. Yeah, it's important mahi for us. It's a healing mahi and it's a spiritual journey also. And so the growth has been amazing. You know, a lot of them, they've come out of their shell, they're talking a lot more. They're more interested in the mahi and how much more we could do. They're adding in their input and they're interested in the future of this moment.
From a small business to taking on an extra 10 overnight, it was quite daunting at the time. Lots of ways it has grown in a good way because the people we've met, the networks we've made throughout this journey. We don't call them employees, we call them our whānau really, because they're an extended part of our family. We look after them and they look after us.
For COVID, I was picking kiwi fruit. I just come back from Australia around about this time last year. When COVID rocked around the corner, and after lockdown, I ended up with popping kiwi. Out here, Waianae,
just very, very grateful that I could move this paper because, yeah, it's so wonderful to have that echo. Ooh. Sorted. Sorry about that. I know you don't want to listen to me twice. No, it is good to have this fabulous story. When I first looked at this whole redeployments, it took me back to a trip I did to the States where I met an entity called Homeboy Industries. There's home girls as well. And it was all about this very thing, but working really strongly, admittedly, with gang families from the Compton and Boyle Heights, etc. So I've always, Josh knows of it, he visited that space too. So I want to know is how we can keep it up, keep doing it. As Nadine says, we know it worked really well in this instance of what was happening with those partnership relationships, seeing the funding come to support it and all those mechanisms and having a team of people believe in this. So can we push it on so that, because I've always thought the most underutilized resource in any space in the region is unemployed people. And, you know, we saw the gold and the gems and the glory of giving young people hope because they're breaking cycles of be it poverty or destitute or low income spaces. So I was heartened with your report. It's very thorough, the graphs, et cetera, into delving deep into the skill bases that were growing, all the training that happened. So how do we keep this going so that we see more break those cycles and grow their skill base and access opportunities so that they can make their world a lot brighter, despite all the challenges and all that came. I just want to thank you, Steve, for the work that you led in this space, Nadine, and all of those people who were part of this redeployment. But can we continue it? And if we need more voices to that speak, then I know we lost a great one with the loss of Annie. But yeah, we've got people that have carried that passion as well. So kia ora.
Through your worship, so we are leading the way in terms of our collaborations with our partners in region, and so the reorganisation of the state sector to be focused in regions is based a lot around our Taputo water model. That model has got significant investment from central government, co-funding and in-kind support from locally, so that will build on the work that's been done in this area.
If not, Councillor Shelby.
Steve, do you know what unemployment stats are currently in the region? No.
I'm not involved in that work anymore, Terry.
So I just wanted to say when in regards to Councillor Akuata Brown's story, the Care Forum that are looking at how we empower our own young ones to train in the right areas to make sure they're equipped for industry that we have here. I had a tour of the WIT yesterday, the technology, and again they raised it that it would be fabulous that we make sure, and I will convey that message to the care group as well, that we make sure we guide some of these young ones into those training programs, high-paying employment, but they said they would rather employ locals, but at this stage we need to take a look at a training program that can equip our young people so that they can then take up those jobs. So I know there's a lot of work happening in that space as well to make sure we have those pipelines to feed industry. But Steve, thank you for the work you've done. Nadine, thank you for overseeing all of this. It was a massive part of it, even though there were lots of partners involved. The Gisborne District Council carried most of the weight, the bulk of it, all the administration, all these stories, pulling everything together. So I just want to thank you and your team. It was wonderful to get that investment into our region, but still there was a lot of work to be done. So thank you for that. And I'll second this report. Councillor Woolsman.
Yeah, we're still standing. Yeah. I just
we are still standing.
I just also wanted to say on behalf of the rural community, thank you for the focus that went into particularly heavy mettling and tree clearance. It has made an enormous difference, and we'll continue to see the benefits, particularly of the tree clearance for years to come. So appreciate that that was a huge beneficiary of this partnership. And thank you to everyone who was involved in delivering that program. And yeah, I second what Meredith said. I think that the impact and what we can deliver when we empower people who have all this potential is really phenomenal. So thank you again. Cheers.
I have a mover, Councillor Meredith Okuaka-Brown. I seconded it. All in favour? Contrary, carried. Thank you for that, Steve. Thank you, Nadine. We're going to have lunch and then we're going to come back public excluded. So thank you. Well, you were just the declared interest. So what's that? So I just want to check with people. Is half an hour? Should we come back 1:45? Is that good for everyone? I'm relatively flexible. 1:45? 1:45. Except if you wanted to, if you've got questions in that regard, but otherwise I'm quite happy for you to